Ready or
All
not?
right, let's do it. So I will call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock. Welcome, everyone, to the Carver Elementary School Building Committee. It's May 5th here at the Irwin K. Washburn IMC, as I call it. So we're going to start off with approving the minutes, so everyone had a chance to look at those. So I need a motion and a second.
Make a motion to accept the minutes from the last meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, it's unanimous. Okay, great. One topic down already. That was quick. So I'm just going to take a minute or so to, hey James, welcome.
Hello.
I'm going to take a minute or so just to kind of outline what we're going to talk about tonight. We got a lot of stuff to cover, and we will cover it all. First thing, I'll just pull it out what we're going to do, and then we'll get to it in a minute. But we are going to talk about tonight, we're going to have a communications report from Heather in a few minutes. So she'll talk about that. And we have like time allotments too. So we're estimating about 10 minutes for that, give or take. And then after that, we're going to have Dan Ryan review the highlights of the Collins report. And you will have time to discuss that as a group, ask any questions, get answers, so we're all on the same page. We can have the transparency for the public. And we got about a half hour for that. And then after that, I'm going to review the timeline, because we got a lot to cover in a short calendar time. So let's talk about that, and we can discuss it. We have about 15 minutes for that. And then when that's done, we are going to have the Dave Seaton talk about the site selection information, the meeting that took place with JC Engineering. And he'll also talk about the review of the hazmat studies. And then when that's over, we're going to shift gears, and we're going to talk about we're going to review the school committee report on the capital asset assessment. I'm going to take care of that with Dave's assistance. We have that for about 15 minutes. And John, how are you? And then Sarah Stearns was nice enough to come up with some pros and cons to think about in the site selection process. We're just going to be brainstorming, and but we'll all have a chance to chime in. And we got about a half hour devoted to that. And at the end of the meeting, we're going to just talk about upcoming dates and some reminders, and that should keep us busy tonight. So we got about 2.5 hours allotted to this, so we'll see how that fares. All right. Okay, so that's the plan for tonight, and we're going to go to the communications report, which Heather Sepulveda has volunteered to take the lead on.
So I made a copy. Does everyone have one of these so everybody can kind of follow along? I don't know, John, you might not have one. So basically the first sheet is, we talked a lot about creating a fact sheet to put out. You know, we talked about whether it be electronic or a paper version. Probably electronic one might be the best way to do this. So right off the bat, I'd like to have some new updated pictures that would go along with some of this literature written in here. I'm probably going to need some help from Liz and Dave in kind of completing some of the beginning pieces. So, you know, we talked about talking about the building's current condition. So, you know, not to have to read through everything. I know everybody can read it, but you know how old each building is, where some of the problems are, how much it would ideally cost to fix those items. I don't know if there's others. I had a few documents I was taking this information from, so that's why I was looking for Dave and Liz to maybe help me. This is kind of just a working document. You can help me fill this in. And also where we are in the MSBA process, so what's been done and you know where we're headed, what direction, what's coming next. And I'm also looking for when we should have this completed by and to share with whom. So that's the first page in a nutshell, and we can go back to it. The second page was some communications ideas that I've come up with. So we talked about social media, you know, Facebook and Twitter, maybe putting one sentence blasts out there on project status updates. And this can be something ongoing that I don't mind taking on, you know, even if a simple, hey, we have a meeting tonight, the date and time where we're meeting. I did that already for this past meeting. fact sheets, I'm not sure how often we wanted to do the fact sheets. Is it quarterly? Do we want to do monthly? You know, how often things are gonna change. So that's why I kind of left it open as a date of completion, and, you know, if I'm the person to do that, I'm comfortable with doing that, but how often do we want to do these fact sheets? James had talked about maybe like a question and answer session at Cranberry and, you know, South Meadow Village, but this will probably happen later on, further into when we have more details, can go in, can do those types of sessions. I thought that was a great idea. Michael had also talked about a new YouTube video of the elementary school. Again, something we might want to get up right away, who's going to do it and when we should get it completed by. At the Board of Selectmen meetings, Michael can kind of give some ongoing updates on where we are, just another way to be able to share their information, newspaper articles. And then I think it might be important to have a person who can be sort of like a PR person, so somebody who, you know, if somebody's confused or has questions about the project, like a go-to person that maybe people from the public can ask questions to. So if they are, you know, wondering something, or you see something that sounds confusing, maybe that person can be that go-to person for those questions. So these are just some of the ideas I had. I'm just looking for you guys to kind of give me some input too on it. So
I think those are some great ideas.
thanks.
It was a good way to lay it out too.
Thanks. So I don't know if you want to, do you want to go back to the first page first, and there might be
I think
things that
that's
I'm
good.
missing, that maybe again Dave and Liz can help me fill in some of the blanks, so you can think about it if, you know.
Some of these numbers were
Old.
2009 numbers, so, but Dave has new numbers.
Okay.
We have more information, more updates, we can.
Okay. And then, you know, down below the MSBA process updates, you know, the letting people know about the initial compliance certification that was done in February. Our first meeting was April 21st. The maintenance and capital planning record, that was already submitted, was that in March?
Everything, it's on the timeline, it tells you in blue, what it's right there.
Yeah, I have one here, actually. So, again, these are things I might have to just update in,
Yeah.
so March, yeah. Now, in the number 5, under the MSBA, number 4, even wording, does that sound okay on, you know, the projections from the MSBA and how big of a building? And
Well, it doesn't account for preschool or special education spaces. So that would.
So instead of any other exceptions, say special education spaces?
Because that's really all it is,
Okay.
yeah.
And then, you know, number 5, we're researching the school site options and designer OPM options. So, you know, once I have the pictures taken, and can update that first part, when do you think is a good timeline to have our first fact sheet go out? And I can email it to everybody to look at it before it was put out. Yeah.
I'm thinking sooner the
Yeah,
better.
I'm thinking sooner too, because a lot of this stuff is pretty, you know, current as far as what's going on. I just didn't know, are we thinking, you know, next week?
I would think in the next couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm. And how do we want to put it out there? Is it just going to be through our website and Facebook? Are we going to electronically? How do you want to share this with the public?
How about if you make a presentation at town meeting and then have handouts for everybody at town meeting? Because then you're gonna get the bulk of the people that we want to address. And we'll be able to make copies because it'll be a presentation that's gonna take 5 minutes as part of, you know, the ongoing discussion. And it'll be the first, if you will, opportunity to reach the masses, where those are the ones that are hopefully engaged because they're showing up at town meeting versus, you know, trying to rush something out in the next couple of weeks.
Okay. And when you say we at town meeting, make the presentation, me.
Well, we have a spokesperson for the committee, and he's in blue.
Yeah,
Okay,
I don't mind
me,
doing it. I don't mind
Just making
presenting.
sure.
Yeah,
No, that's fine. That's actually probably a better timeline too, to do it
That's
at
more
town meeting.
realistic.
I can get the pictures together and maybe we can add a little bit more to it
sure.
too. So, okay.
Because I understand, talking to town councils, we as presenting information can make that available to whoever we're presenting it to. We just can't submit it out unsolicited. So a town meeting, because we would be on the agenda, if you will, the warrant for a committee making a report, would be appropriate for us to do that, plus we can ask them for some money. So let's tell them what we're gonna do with it.
Okay.
It would be the perfect opportunity to, here's where we are, here's what we're trying to do. And, I know a lot of this has been said before, but again, we're just starting all over again. It's a perfect opportunity.
Okay, okay.
And Heather, we have a lot of that 11/17 paper I usually do with the school committee reports for town meeting. Just a handout, we don't usually speak, but it makes a nice big, it's the size of one of those big spreadsheets. It makes a nice presentation that people, and there's nothing to fall out, just
Okay.
it ends up being 4 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper.
So when I'm ready to print this, you're saying that I can?
We can print it if it's for town meeting, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
The town meeting would have some sort of PowerPoint, I imagine.
Yep.
You could put it up on the screen.
The only thing, we can't give unsolicited handouts. We can't just blanket the town with information they didn't request that we print. We can do it at town meeting.
Now, what we can do, picking up on what the superintendent said, is set up a website or an email address where people can send in that they want to be notified in the future. Once we have them on a list, once they've requested all information that comes out of this committee, then we can push directly to them and hopefully add people to that list over time, and that would be within the realm of what we're allowed to do.
So maybe on this fact sheet, we should have like a contact information spot, like at the bottom. Can we say if you'd like to continue to receive information, can you do something like that?
Send an email to this address or
Yeah.
put your, yes.
Okay.
Now, does that mean you can't put something like this out on social media? Is that considered unsolicited information if you're?
If they sign up to be on that site, it's okay. They have
So
to
like the
request,
groups that we have, the,
The parents page,
Parents that are
everybody asked to be there,
Okay.
so.
You'd have to recreate a new list from what you already have. But once you as a parent receive that information privately, let me rephrase this. Once your neighbor receives this information privately, they can then push that out to the Facebook page. Because they'll get it at town meeting and they can push it out for those that didn't attend.
okay.
Anyways,
know.
no, I mean, anyway, you know what I mean. I just wouldn't suggest any of the committee members
Okay.
submit information, but if any citizen receives it and wants to push it out to other people, that's their choice.
And where should they contact? What should we create like an email that's, school building committee at?
Liz, can we do that on your website?
I've got it.
Oh, you have one,
We
okay.
have the school, we have a way for people to sign on. We'll just have to activate it again. We took it down.
Okay.
So we
So
start
I'll
all
need
over
that.
again, we put in, if you sign up for here, you're requesting information, and we will give that to you. With
Okay.
a little bit more elaboration.
Yeah.
So maybe just, at some point this week, maybe Liz and Dave, you can kind of take a look at this and see if there's things that I should add, and I know you might have some numbers updates. On the second page where I have the communications ideas, I was hoping that, just what you thought about these ideas, and also, there's a couple who would be the person, so maybe help me fill in some of those blanks.
Can I add something to the first page?
Yeah?
I was thinking, time-wise, you're talking about, you do the presentation at town meeting, and you do some, but our next meeting after that, because we wouldn't want to do the stat sheet before that necessarily, because that would take the sting out of presenting it at town meeting. But our first meeting, we're on television, will you take that stat sheet? Is there any way we can present that as part of our meeting? So that the people watching TV are gonna see it?
So the next elementary school building committee meeting after?
Oh,
the
no,
town
I'm
meeting?
talking about our next meeting, the building committee,
Yeah,
okay? Right after town meeting, what are we meeting, the second Monday?
Well, we might have to meet before then, but.
Well, no, I mean, we're gonna,
Right.
but we don't wanna put it out on our next meeting because you're gonna put it out at town meeting first, right?
If we give it to the cable studio in advance, like on a flash drive, he can overlay the voices on top of it and
Right as part of our meeting.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Oh.
He
You
can
can
insert.
also lay it down and I can just shoot that while you're, and they
Yeah.
can read it while you're talking, so.
Yeah.
So like the town meeting is June 2nd, and then our first meeting in June, we're meeting twice a month?
I'm gonna
Yeah,
try
this
to,
month,
yeah.
right? Okay. Our first meeting in June, we do this overlay process. And that'll, we get it out second
A
time?
couple, yeah. Okay.
A week later, right? June 9th.
Well, that'll be school committee,
Uh-huh.
so we'll have to work that out.
Okay.
Larry,
Dan.
two possible suggestions. One is to kind of keep it current. I might list just the year that the buildings were built, because, you know, this is gonna probably sit around for a couple of years, and then
Okay.
it won't be current if we say it's 38 years old, next year it'll be 39.
Okay.
So using the dates, the actual dates when the buildings were built might help.
Okay.
Then just likewise with any numbers that are presented, it would probably make sense to cite the source of the number, where did that come from? And if it was from a study, you know, at least list the year or the reference to it, because you may get questions on where did you get the number from?
Okay.
So probably it's gonna be a good idea to cite the references from the numbers, and then in a couple of these cases, there are no numbers, and I don't know if it's worth putting that in, because I think what you're trying to show is that if there is ongoing maintenance relative to the age of the building and the fact that it's past its end of life, you know, what do we want to save the town by doing the new building? You know, that's what we're trying to show here, is that it
Right.
would cost us this much in maintenance, and this would be kind of a savings, that we should apply these dollars to a new building versus something that's end of life.
No.
So showing that source and where those projections are coming from would probably be helpful to.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Very.
Liz, yeah.
Just, Dave, you updated these numbers just before the last capital plan, right?
On this building, I don't have them with me, but I.
But we did update them just before our last capital outlay plan? Or was it last year we updated them?
It was, I don't think it was done for this year's, I think they were just carried over.
Okay, all right. So we have some within the last 12 months, but not right up to date.
Can I ask if these estimates were done, I mean, how were they done? Were they a
These-
third-party contractor came in and gave you an estimate? How
No,
current was that
they-
estimate?
No, these are not hard figures, these were rough, soft figures. These-
What was the source?
What was the source?
Yeah.
Experience. They came from it, their estimates.
Okay, so we should put a footnote on there that, you know, they were estimates from this year.
Mm-hmm.
I did ask Dave off the side here, if, when he goes back to do these numbers, if he could add another sentence or two, just to further elaborate what the numbers are, just so that the average person, when they see, you know, a $4 million number, which I know is a typo, that they'll be able to look at it and say, you know, this is what that is, in a couple sentences.
Did anyone have anything else on the first page? I could just. Okay, so on the second page, I'm just looking for one, does everyone like the ideas on the second page? And then two, maybe help me fill in some of the blanks on dates of completion and who would complete those.
Why don't we take one at a time?
Yeah.
And social media's first, right?
Yeah, so, I mean, I don't, you know, I've already done it, so the social media piece, I went out there and I put, you know, just when we were meeting, you know, the second, new school building committee meeting is May 5th, the date, and I attached the agenda, so, you know, people were aware, and that's all, like, I'm just looking to do, you know, 1 to 2 sentence informational posts on, you know, what's going on, status update, things that can be shared, or, you know, hey, we're meeting, things like that. And I just want to know that everybody is comfortable with, if I'm the one doing that, if you're okay with that.
I think that's fine.
So far, what I've seen has been excellent.
Thanks.
Yeah.
My only suggestion is just coordinate it with the chairman, that's all.
Okay.
It's a quick question on the websites. Are we allowing to have almost like an interactive when, you know, people might be able to ask questions of the website that we could see maybe addressed in some of our meetings? Bring the audience in, someone sitting at home on the computer looking at one of these sites, can they ask questions of us?
So meaning if I put up something
We
in,
could do it at the blog, if we used, and I do have a blog set up for this, that we used before, so they can interact with it. It's harder to do on a website, but the blog, it's, just sponsored by Google, so we don't have to host it.
How is that, like, who responds to that then? Who would be the respondent?
Anybody just has a question, and then there'll be editors of the blog. And the way we did it before is who has an answer to this, it's accurate and can be backed up. There were people on the building committee. It requires constant monitoring, so, it's not like something you can ignore, or if this is something we're gonna have to pose to MSBA and get back to you, that can always be an answer. But it was pretty active when we had the blog.
and that dialogue can happen in Facebook too, so if we put out there, an update on, here's MSBA's projections on how large of a school they're gonna build, it could set up a dialogue in just the comment area,
Yeah.
As far as creating a dialogue.
However you think's best, either the blog or Facebook.
I have no experience with a blog, so I don't know. I see Facebook as such an active
Yeah,
place.
it really is.
So
The only problem I see is sometimes the
The
comments
banter.
get a little out of
Becomes
hand
personal.
and it gets off topic very quickly.
Yeah.
I thought, like, we had a pretty big discussion about that last time, making sure that what we're doing is responding as a whole and responding, collectively with factual information, and really trying to avoid that sort of pulling and that drawing and that topic.
The key with the blog is you can, the comments, you can set the comments up so they come to the blog editor first, say if you were the blog editor. And then if it's just personal vindictive stuff, then just
ignore
Right.
it,
it's
yeah.
gone,
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know enough about Facebook, I've used it, but I don't know enough to know all of its,
I usually
the
never
same thing on
respond to the
Facebook.
banter, like I don't get involved in it,
Right.
basically, I posted
but no
something
one
factual.
sees it at all, but that's the advantage of the, but you maybe can do that on Facebook.
Yeah, as the administrator of a page, you can delete it immediately.
Okay,
Maybe someone will see it, but.
yeah.
I think, just to manage it, so it's not somebody's full-time job, I would think if we receive questions via any of those mediums, maybe we could have the questions kind of resolved by our advisors, bring it to the meeting, make sure we're all on the same page, then we could respond. Instead of having this, I know we're in an instant age, but instead of responding instantly, let's slow down, think it over, get the answer right, then put it in because we all concur, and we just, because there's no room for errors, and then we talked about that wrestling with a pig, that says get out of hand, and no matter what you're reading, whether it's Wicked Local or whatever, so I think if we can control it, and I know this is sense even in our lives, you gotta respond, because someone asks you a question, you gotta respond, but let's just cool it, I think, and think it over and get it right, then reply, I think the informational stuff, it's like, get it out, because we want people to show up here, or there, or wherever we need them. I just worry about that, being us giving wrong information, because we're doing it so quickly.
Barry, I agree with you on that, and, the citizens, this is such an important project in the community, they are gonna want to ask questions. And I think we have a responsibility to respond to those questions in a responsible way, which is what you're talking about. Maybe to add a little bit more of a process to it is when we receive questions, why don't we log them in and keep this running tally of questions that come in. And I think as we talked about last time, by us doing some of these fact sheets and Q&As, there may be a question that comes in 7 times, asked 7 different ways, but it's still the same answer.
Right.
And instead of responding to that, we can just say, just look at fact sheet number 2, item B3. And there's the answer, and copy and paste that in there as a way of just keeping a log so we make sure that every resident has been heard as to what their concerns may be. Now, I don't know how that's going to be managed, Liz, but I think doing a log and keeping a running total track of stuff. Now, if we get a personal question, then we don't wrestle with the pig here, so delete.
It can be done either on Facebook, the website, or or in, you know, we can collect all the questions and answer them twice a month or whatever we want to do. Be done that way.
Yeah.
I'm sure many of them will be overlapping, like you said,
Right.
almost like a frequently asked question page
Yeah.
kind of thing, where a lot of them could be responded to that way.
Maybe the best way is to use the Carver Building Project at carver.org. And people can send an email with the questions. We can print them all out
Yep.
and then decide which ones we can address and which ones we can't. So that is a very easy electronically way we can manage this.
And then on social media, we could say, you know, you'll find your answer on
We could
carver.org.
refer them to it,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, and that also proves it was requested information,
Okay.
that we aren't blanketing the community with information that wasn't requested.
Okay.
So we keep moving with Facebook, but we like to receive questions in a written format via email that'll be logged in, and then we'll respond to those within an appropriate time frame.
And that'll be the same email I'll have on the fact sheet that you sent? Okay.
So you and I can meet with either Candy or Ellen and set this all up so that you thoroughly know, you know, how it works and everything.
Okay. Okay.
Just want to make sure we describe the process to people too. So like John's idea, people feel like they're going to get some answers.
Okay. And now on the fact sheets, I had written down quarterly for now. I don't know how often you wanted to do the fact sheets. And I know, Michael, it was kind of your idea. How often were you thinking? I mean, monthly, maybe some of them can come quicker than others, depending on how much information we have to share. But how often were you thinking of sharing these fact sheets?
I would say quarterly right now and then if there's a need to do an extra one because
We
we're
will.
moving and making a lot of progress, then we can do it faster, but at a minimum of quarterly.
Okay.
And, you know, I'd look at this one in town meeting as this is the, you know, the first one, and then we do another one in the fall, and then in the winter.
So the date of completion on the first one is June 2nd. Well, I'll put date of completion to be like the end of May, so everybody can take a look at it.
And then you'd be targeting like the 1st of September.
For the
That would be
next
quarterly.
one.
Well, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay.
That would be our next meeting, right?
What do you mean?
To have the fact sheet ready, would have to be ready for our next meeting if we're gonna do it before.
Sorry,
town
wait,
meeting.
when's the next meeting? Okay.
We haven't set, by the time we finish tonight, I think we'll know when we need a next meeting, depending on how much we get through within this one
Okay.
meeting. And then when we set the next meeting, we can decide. I'm thinking we probably need 2 meetings before town meeting.
I would agree.
But maybe we're gonna get through more tonight than 2.5 hours.
Okay, so by our next meeting, I'll have this more up to date, I'll have more information, and I'll have the pictures, and then everybody can really take a look and check it through one more time, tell me what's missing or looks fine, what you think. So number 3 was the Cranberry and South Meadow Village. I think that's something, James, that you were thinking later on in the process, right?
Yeah, I think so. The Q&A part kinda, I mean, we talked about that a little bit. I don't know how much we can really answer and how much we can really say.
So more
because
just
we'd
an
only be
informational.
representing there, and I'm not sure if that's something, a box we wanna open up or how far we could go with that.
So more of just an
Yeah, okay.
informational session?
I guess, you know, sort of an idea we put out there, but
Can we do
if
that?
anybody has any comments on that as far as where.
Well,
we're
last time we offered to do one of our building committee meetings there and take questions from the public, and that worked out well.
Oh, good, so we have a precedent for it.
going. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, you know, but they have a new governing board now, so, you know, it's always up to whoever's in charge of their association. But, people did show up.
Okay. Okay. And we talked about creating a new YouTube video of the elementary school, when we wanted that completed by, and
I'll help with that.
okay. And are we thinking of that being this month as well, to kind of get the process rolling, or when did everyone want that completed by? Because, I mean, that's something you could probably even tie into the slideshow that you show at town meeting too, if it's short enough. Let's not, we don't need to go on but you could have the fact sheet and maybe even just the short video of the school.
I would suggest that you want to have it done before school gets out,
Oh, yeah, we have to have kids in the building, yeah.
Yeah, and you want to have it while people are still interested before the summer starts.
Yeah,
And I think it's great for you to be involved, and Heather, and probably Dave too, you know, just to hit all the key points of the issues with the building.
We can
Okay.
So you
shoot
need
it.
from an academic, a PR standpoint, and a structural standpoint.
I mean, with the cable's help, we can shoot it in 2 hours, but it took quite a while for them to edit it, you know?
okay.
So they would need 2 or 3 weeks to edit it.
Oh, okay,
You know, because they work on all volunteer labor.
okay. All right, that's good to know.
And I think at previous town meetings, you know, when people have done presentations, you can only go on so long before people start getting kind of antsy.
Oh,
So I
yeah.
don't know, but it'd have to be,
Sure.
between the PowerPoint and the video, it'd have to be perfect, or, you know,
Yeah.
short. is the-
Sure, no, I agree with you.
I think if you just, like, give the link out at town meeting and let them know where they can
Okay.
go review it, as
Yeah.
opposed to trying to do it
Yeah,
that way.
I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Promote it, but
Video
not
would be
necessarily show
overshot
it. Yeah.
at the town meeting.
Yeah.
Okay,
Agreed.
okay.
And I think seeing it over and over on CCAP would be great, you know, it'd get a big bang for its buck.
Okay.
Or that, and that link you mentioned, James.
Michael, I thought it'd be a good idea at the Board of Selectmen meetings that you could kind of give some updates here and there, when you can.
I think Dick and I can make that work.
Yeah,
Yeah, I wanted to help as much as I could on it.
yeah, so just as you have update, just another way to keep spreading the message. Newspaper articles, I'm sure there'll be some ongoing. Who typically is in charge?
Kathy Gallerani,
Okay, but who gives her the articles, like who's?
she has been just watching tapes and writing the articles. She hasn't really been coming to the meeting. And it has resulted in a few, just like minor misunderstandings. But I think if we work with her to fact check it before it goes to press, you know, of course, she's a writer, she can write what she wants, but there have been some minor things that weren't correct.
Okay,
So we should work with her, but she apparently is the only person writing local stories for Carver.
Okay.
Is she responsive when it comes to correction? Does she put it up in her next article?
Not so far, but I think she will help out. I've talked to her several times. What she's really, she has to go to every meeting or watch every meeting. I think she's just behind the 8 ball all the time. She really doesn't have unlimited time to do it. But I think if we work with her and just get in a habit of fact checking, then,
okay,
you know.
I think the fact sheets will help her an awful lot.
okay. And, so the last one, I guess, would probably end up being you, Barry, right?
Yeah, if I'm gonna be the spokesman, sure.
Yeah, so,
sure.
and actually, this probably goes back into answering the questions from the social media stuff that we'll end up bringing it back here and answering them together.
Yeah.
In case there's a bunch of questions, but probably you would be the person if,
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. That seems like it fits.
but I think that also tied into the logging that and telling the questions and bringing them here, so. So yeah, that's it for my communications piece. I probably went over the
That's
10
good.
minutes just a little bit, but I just wanted, that would be helpful. So I'll connect with Dave and Liz, to help me fill in some of the blanks over here later on.
Right, that's
Thank you.
beautiful. Thanks, Heather.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Evan.
Excellent job. And thanks for volunteering for that communications piece. That's awesome. All right, next thing on the agenda, we are right on time, which is fantastic. A little bit, a few minutes. Dan Ryan is going to, he took the Collins report, broke it down, and summarized it. So we're giving about a half hour to Dan to kind of facilitate the summary and get that conversation going between all of us and any questions and answers we might have too. So Dan Ryan, take it away.
So yeah, Barry asked me to go through the effort that was put on by the Collins Center. So 3 areas. One, I'll give you a little history of how this came about, and then we can talk about the sections in here. And then the other piece, I think, which is important, is that there are some action items that were cited by the report if you had a chance to go through and see, and we should summarize those and then decide as a committee how are we going to follow up on them and get them complete. So where this came from is the Town Building Study Committee originally was put together to look at the condition of all the town buildings and recommend actions and some funding options. So when the committee did that back in 2010, 2011, we identified 4 top buildings in the town after we looked at every single building, and and the state of the buildings. And again, we were put together as an ad hoc committee to the Board of Selectmen to advise the Board of Selectmen on how the town should proceed. And so at the time, the 4 buildings, of course, no surprise, were the primary and elementary school buildings, and then the police and central fire station were at the top of the list at the time. And also, what came out of that initial effort was putting together the Capital Building Stabilization Fund as a way for the town to save money for the police and fire projects, because we recognized how difficult it is to raise funds. So we thought if we could find a means to save dollars each year, that would help us to move those projects forward. So that all happened, and then the committee took a little bit of a recess until the recent urgent needs came about. So we reconvened back in March of 2013 with a goal to kind of take a fresh pair of eyes, start anew, see where we are, make whatever recommendations we needed to. So one of the things we went to look at was the master plan. And we wanted to see, since we were about to start on the building projects, the fire and the police eventually, we wanted to know what the master plan said about the layout for the town. What should we do with the buildings, and what was planned. And what we found is that the master plan had not been updated. It was a little stale, so it didn't really address that. So we were trying to brainstorm on some other options, and eventually that led us to the idea of going to the Collins Center. We looked at some entities that did the same kind of work, but we settled in on the Collins Center, and thus contracted with them for the town to look at first the public safety buildings, because they were more urgent. We had already come to the conclusion that the funding mechanism was in place, and then to go on, and of course when this project got off the ground, to assist with that too. So it was always the purpose of the town building study committee to be factual, look at all the facts, and also explore all ideas. Just brainstorm about anything possible to help us solve the problems that we have. And so we also asked the Collins Center to take an impartial perspective and also help to identify a strategy for the town to move forward. And I think in the end, they did a pretty decent job for us for the police and fire building. And then, as you probably hopefully had a chance to read through the report that they provided here, you can see that they were pretty thorough and really gave us a lot of good information to build upon as we move forward. So some of the key sections, I don't know if you have it handy, but starting on page 5, I think we didn't ask them to do this piece, but they put together, I think they wanted to learn how this worked too, but they put together an overview of the MSBA funding process. So I think especially valuable for this committee, as I know they met with the MSBA, and they probably had a lot of conversations with Liz on her experience. And they also had one of the members from the committee, Henry Fitzgerald, was also, had gone through the MSBA process for school departments several times. So they updated the latest information on this, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but going through on pages 5, 6, 7, you could see that they did a pretty decent job in identifying the different modules and what process we're basically going to be living as we go forward here, as we go through the project. But there are a couple of things that I wanted to point out. On page 6, I think one of the maybe areas that could be explored upon a little bit more in here is what they call the socioeconomic factors that the town has to face. Now, this is what the MSBA uses as criteria, but often it's been brought up in committee meetings that Carver's unique. We do have some unique situations, and I think it would be well worth our ability to understand how some of these unique situations that Carver's gone through has kind of, I guess, define our socioeconomic piece here. And not sure if that would help us in our case with the MSBA, but they do rely on this a lot in their criteria, and there are some very unique situations that have happened in the town of Carver and are still happening in the town of Carver that we may want to identify and stress as an action item. And then another important page is, for everybody, is page 10. And so as you walk through the process, what they did, a nice little summary on page 10 on I think the piece that's been the biggest challenge thus far, which is the appropriation requirements. So that's going to be probably one of our biggest challenges moving forward. And they did show that within 270 days, the eligibility period, the district must have secured funding for the OPM and designer sufficient to prepare the feasibility study, schematic design. And then within 120 days of approval by the MSBA of a proposed project and a project scope and budget agreement, the district will have to secure local funding for completion of construction drawings and for full construction. So that's very important. And I think that's where the heart of the matter is, as people would say, because, you know, some of the history I'll give you that's caused some, you know, that's why we are here today. Another nice section is they did summarize for people the, you know, the activities to date. And while we'll make this report available on the website, it's probably going to be hard for a lot of people to read and understand. And as maybe part of this fact process that we're talking about, it might be worthwhile over time to split out pieces of it and maybe summarize it and make it available in a timely fashion when the time comes that I think we need to put out the information. But I think the activities to date is a good history for everybody that's new to the committee to go through and see what's happened. So moving on, some of the key things that we did ask the Collins Center to look at were, you know, the need, you know, just validate the need. The Town Building Study Committee had, again, looked at the public safety buildings in the school as, you know, are recognizing that there was a strong need there, so we needed the Collins Center to reiterate that, and they did a good job at town meeting when it came to the, I think if everybody went with the fire station project, they did a great job, you know, showing the need for that and helping to move that project forward. And then also, the site was an important piece of this too. We'll talk about that. And then the funding piece, I don't think they spent as much time on it as I would have liked, but they ran out of funding. And so they did what they could based on, you know, some challenging areas that they had to spend more time on that they didn't expect to. So going through the need, so I think this is very good. Starting on page 15. And I think that for the most part, most of the information, we have talked about this for years now. So most of the people have been involved in the town and have been working to you know, make these projects happen, you know, understand the need. And then some of the other things that I wanted to say about that is when the Town Building Study Committee got involved and assessed the need, and then the second thing that we went on to do was to talk to the residents, and that was a part of our process. And, you know, more importantly, we wanted to talk to the residents that were against the project. And we had many meetings with residents that did not support the project. And in all of those conversations, the need never came up. You know, I think everybody understood the need. So I just wanted to say as a committee, I think it's important to summarize the information in here, but I don't know that we have to sell the need as much, because I think most of the people in town understand there is a strong need for all of these buildings. What they needed help on was understanding how we're going to finance the projects. You know, so that was one of the key things. And so what we heard, and I'm just passing as a committee the information as we talked to the residents, is that they wanted to make sure the town as a whole was looking at the whole budget picture from a couple of reasons. First of all, there's always the unforeseen expenditures that come year over year. You know, and every year there's a new challenge. And so some of those challenges are going to impact the taxpayers in the town. So they wanted to make sure that was taken into consideration. They wanted to make sure that the town was doing diligence to look at all the budgets and find a way to find money, if possible, or at least report back to the residents that the town had done everything they could to look at the budgets and where we could find money, found that money, and if we couldn't, just report back, this is where everybody had looked for those funds. And then again, how do we minimize the impact to the taxpayer? So that was an important part of, I think, the Town Building Study Committee's understanding with the residents that were opposed to the project. It wasn't need. It was all based on the financial and the proof that the town was doing enough to look hard at ways to bring the cost down in both the building and in the ability to look in the budgets. So I think, again, let's summarize The Collins Center, if you look at all the points that they made in here on page, going on page 18, 19, and beyond, we all know this, and these are very important points. We know that the current building is inadequate, deficient, overcrowded, beyond the useful life, and unsafe. And it does not provide quality, an academic environment for quality education. We all know that. And that's what they summarized basically, but they gave us a lot of good details in here.
I think it's great to tie what you're doing in to the communications piece, because again, here are some objective facts. We got a great source, so we can, detail where it came from.
Right.
So they're definitely not separate instruments, they're definitely tied together.
Yes, and I think it's good if, again, going back to facts, there's a lot of good information in here we can, over time, just summarize and put out there, as well as putting a report out, but it is a lot for people to read. So on the needs piece.
As I've read through this, now we have decided throughout our time as need. This is not need, this is overwhelming need.
Right.
There's a much higher need now than there was 2 years ago, 4 years ago, or 6 years ago. So we need to think about that when we're looking at the finances of it too.
Correct. And I think there was a good summary in here about, the MSBA process and the fact of the MSBA's assessment of the, top schools that need to be addressed. And Carver's still way up at the top. They've been able to take care of a lot of the other cities and towns, but Carver's still in their list of, one of the key areas for the two buildings that need to be addressed in Massachusetts. So I don't know if there's any questions from anybody on that need piece.
Can I just get some, just for the public too, and just to remind me, talk about the need of this school, what's the ranking? Are we top, the worst 50, worst 10?
Let me find their statement in here if you want. They had a number of schools listed in one of the comments, probably in the beginning. So in the first, on page 15, the first paragraph, and then there's, right. So they go on to say that the Commonwealth study in 2010 prepared by the MSBA gave the Carver Elementary School the lowest possible rating for building condition and physical environment. When first studied in 2005, 62 schools out of 1,817 received the lowest rating for condition and environment. By 2010, the number with the most poorest ratings in both categories have been reduced to 23. So 1%, well, 1.09%.
So that follows Mr. Ward's point that you just mentioned. It's a dire situation. So.
Although the diagram on page 16 is supposed to tell you that, but the numbers, they don't identify all the columns as well, so you can't. But it looks like Carver's supposed to be the little lowest columns there. That's gray, light gray.
The lightest one.
Yeah.
Right.
Dan, did you want to make a comment?
Sure.
The MSBA is very reluctant to say we're one of the 5 worst. They usually couch it in how many other schools got a 4. But if you do the math, it's down to 5 schools left that were rated a 4 that haven't tried to do something.
5 schools in the state.
Yeah. So, although they wouldn't say we were in the bottom 5, it's just failed to take action that resulted in a new school. But they are very reticent to say we're the 5th worst school in the state. So they really just say everybody is, if that's in number 4, which, that's what Monica put in this,
They did.
They were very accurate, yeah.
1%.
Yeah.
So when Dan just read that paragraph that said that 62 schools received the lowest ratings, most of those schools have fixed themselves in some way.
Yep.
But 5 have not. And we're one of them.
Mhm.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, it says 17 have submitted. Of the 23, 17 have submitted at least one statement of interest.
Yeah.
John?
Prospective people who want to move to the town, research, savvy people research all this. And that has a big impact on resale and property values. And I think that's another pitch point, to Dick's point. We have overwhelming need in many areas. One is to get the real estate market rebuttressed, because we're suffering here, and a lot of people don't realize how nice the town is, but just look at these facts, which you can't hide. There they are. They don't realize that they're great teachers here and everything else, and we all agree with that. But I'm just saying, that they need the infrastructure. So that's going to help everybody, and I think that's where everybody becomes a winner, is that your property becomes a little bit more valuable, and there's an easier place to be able to sell your property. Because right now, a lot of towns around here are doing well, and our resales are slow. And that could be tied right into this. So I think we need to, whenever we're formulating arguments.
Young families, John, you're right, look to the schools committee, the school system before they buy that house.
People look for the towns, along with the town being aesthetically pleasing and things of that nature. The next thing, one of the most important things a young family looks at, and that's who buys houses. They're people with children or are gonna have children.
They also look at the tax rate too, so we need to.
There's no question about it. There's a balance. I don't disagree with you, but there's a lot of towns out there with a lower tax rate and a better school system as far as these numbers are concerned. I'm not saying the teachers are better. I'm just please don't misread that. But I think it's important that the public perception is strong for Carver, and I think if we can see these things, these are public probably, right? So if you're going to make what is most people's biggest investment of their life, which is buying a home, they want to know they're going to be able to sell that home someday for a legitimate investment.
I know we made some rules last week, I don't remember them exactly, but I see Jay John wants to ask something in the audience, so I'm gonna let him recognize him.
I was gonna preface my comment with that, because as an invited guest here, I don't know if I'm allowed to say anything. But there's a point apropos to what's being discussed now that is vital. And that is, there is a website called Zillow, Zillow, which many people, if they're about to move into a new community, they will check that because it gives a rating of how the town stacks up with its school system. And Carver is down at, it's rated a 4 as a means of comparison. Duxbury is rated 9, Plymouth is between 6 and 7, and along with us, there is Wareham at 4, so.
Excellent, thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. John. All right, want to keep going? Dan?
Okay,
Thanks.
sure. So starting on page 27 then, so in summarizing the rest of the report into a single sentence, it's how and where does Carver create an adequate and safe educational environment for the youth of Carver that's affordable to the residents? I mean, that's a huge task, and that's a huge challenge. As well as getting through the MSBA process, that's what we have to focus on, I think, as a committee. And so going into, as you can follow along here, so they did a look at all the effort that had been put in prior to this, and they recognized the monumental efforts that have been done by the people whose shoulders we're standing on, as they would say, as the phrase goes, because there's been a lot of work done by many people to get us to this point. And so they summarized the 22 options that had originally been identified and looked at, and how they came down to what they considered the 3 options, B3, E2, and H. And then they went on to talk about how at the time, the committee had chosen the design B3 to move forward with. The only thing that I think has come up a little bit in a couple of conversations is that we probably need to update with the most recent school population projections. So that's an action item, I think, that I've heard mentioned a couple of times, is that things change, so we have to look at what the most recent population projection is and make sure we update accordingly.
When we get to schematic, that will change the square foot of the building during the schematic.
And so there's a lot of good information here on going through the proposed site on pages 28 and 29 for a little bit of history, and also some recommendations by the Collins Center on again, some action items, which I'll summarize at the end, that we need to do with respect to the option B3 site plan. So one of the things too that has come up is making sure that, and the Collins Center covers this in the section too, is that I think a key insight is that while renovation may appear to provide lower cost to the town, because we get more points from the MSBA because they promote reimbursements, there is also a risk that we could find that the opposite may happen. The actual cost of the project could become higher if the renovation becomes more complex than what was seen. So that's an important point that, again, that we need to do diligence on. The MSBA will not further reimburse the town if we start into a reimbursement project and we open things up and say, uh-oh, you know, this wasn't expected, and it's gonna cost us money to take care of that. So while new construction tends to be more predictable in terms of complexity, time, and cost than a renovation, we need to weigh them out very carefully in the overall project. So they identified that at best, we could save $1.17 million if everything went according to plan. So we should weigh that out with what we could lose if it didn't go according to plan, and make sure if there are risks in a renovation, we identify those quickly, and then, have a discussion around how to mitigate those risks around that. And so that's pretty much this section here, and then they do talk about the timeline, which was interesting too. On page 32, for a renovation project, they're saying it's expected to go at least 30 months, which is an important fact to understand too, because 30 months is a long time, when you're doing renovation as far as disruption goes and things like that. And that's, again, assuming if things go according to plan.
That part I didn't understand where she got that number from, because Design Partnership told us 27. But maybe she calculated it with other factors, but I would just, and I had plenty of opportunity to ask her where she got the number, and I just didn't do it, so
Okay.
I could ask her that.
So the variation's somewhere between 27 and 30.
Yeah, I
And-
just forgot to ask her.
Okay, and she broke it down on page 32 into phase 1, 1B, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and each of those have months associated with them, so we'd have to look at each of those numbers.
Yeah.
And maybe see if there is a discrepancy in it.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's pretty much that section, and then they do move on the consideration of the school site, and again, our committee asked them to look at that, and I think once they got into that, they realized that the town had not, well, from what I think what they summarized, that the town had not investigated this site in enough detail at the time to be able to weigh out the trade-offs, and so they're recommending basically that that get completed. So they do go on and talk about on page 35 the merits again of the new construction versus the renovation, and then the merits of the renovation versus the new construction. They did a preliminary study on the possibility of siting the school over at some possible areas at the high school, middle school location. However, they did state that there are some challenges that would have to be looked at and to make that determination. So I think what they're trying to say is that we should approach each of these sites with a weighted set of pros and cons, and say what makes sense here. What are the pros? There's definitely a lot of pros to both sites and a lot of cons to both sites. That in the end, if we explore them with the enough analysis, then we can weigh that out as a committee and then hopefully quickly decide what's going to make sense.
Could I ask a question?
John, yes, sir.
Since that's a huge, watershed moment, whether you're remodeling or you're building new versus this site versus that site, I don't know when that comes up on the agenda but I think it's important sooner than later, because then our efforts are drilling down on whatever it is we're doing. you know, we're not working two parallel courses, you know, because that's really, you know, counterproductive, I think. I think it's a lot more productive to wait, you know, ferret that out, whatever that takes, as quickly as we can, and then really drill on the option that we choose.
In fact, we can't do anything until we make that decision. I mean.
Okay,
it's
I wasn't sure, I
impo-
hadn't heard any.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
impossible to do anything
Okay.
that MSBA requires until we make the site decision.
Because I think there's a lot
Yeah.
of things when you
You're
really,
absolutely right.
when you look at it, you have to look at everything, but there's a lot of questions that may not have been brought up prior that will need to be weighed, you know, and efficiency. So without having any bias one way or the other, I'm just saying we need to figure out where we are. So this committee is really spending time because, you know, 30 months is a hell of a long time. I mean, you know, that, we will go that way, which is fine. I'm just saying, you know, getting to that point where we pull the trigger. I mean, you're talking, you know, was it 45 years now from now? I mean, 'cause
Well, since 2005.
no, I mean, from this point forward.
Oh,
Because 30 months is 2.5 years, so.
Yeah,
30
2.5
months
years,
is from
on
the
top of when you are able to pull the
That's
trigger.
when you start.
Here.
30 months is when you put the shovel in the ground.
Right.
But it was our experience with, from start to finish, feasibility and schematic was another 2 years.
Right, so you're talking 2.5 plus 2.
5 years,
Right. That's a long time.
yeah.
Just talked to a guy who's having a baby in September, and we'll get it built, and his little guy will be going, or little girl will be going into kindergarten, right?
We hope.
Sounds good, sounds good to me.
Yeah, a quick question to John's point, Michael, you mentioned something about a request town meeting for funding. What would that be if we haven't really decided on what path to go down?
Well, that's what we have to fund, and that's what MSBA will pay for us to go forward and do the feasibility study for the alternative for a new site. And they'll pay for any new work that has to be done with the current options. So they will fund both projects going forward. The question is for looking at a new site, is to what's the level of effort that needs to be done to get to a yes or a no decision. And that's what we need to look at. Right now, you know, we're showing about $329,000 in two accounts that were approved by town meeting for feasibility and schematic. We still need to look at those numbers and make sure that those are still available to be reused. You know, we need to have enough money to hire an OPM, hire a designer, do this initial, you know, evaluation of an alternative site and get some decisions done by the end of the year, make a decision.
Mike, is that separate from whether you're building new or, I mean, obviously, well, obviously, if you're picking a new site, you're building new, you know, but,
Sure, if you're picking a new site, absolutely you're building new.
right.
Because our issue with this site is that we have no option to house the students. If you tore down this building today, where are you gonna put those students for, you know, I don't know, what's the schedule for a new building, 24 months? Still, where are you gonna put them for 2 years? And MSBA is not gonna pay for the cost of housing those over that 2-year period. So that doesn't become an option to build new on this site from the get-go.
And just a little point of clarification. After we did whatever study it is we do to determine if we can use the middle high school site, then you have to do the MSBA feasibility study. That determining whether or not we can use it isn't part of their traditional feasibility. And they will pay for whatever it takes, they will reimburse us for whatever it takes to figure out if we can build there. But they won't pay for the true MSBA feasibility study because they already paid for the other one.
They will pay for all new information, so by looking at a new site, that's new information. By updating the plans for this building, they'll pay for that, so I think we can tailor this so that they will reimburse any new money that's spent on this project. Again, the question is to what level of detail do we go into looking at a new alternative site? No one's advocating that you spend $800,000 doing a full-blown feasibility study for a new site right now. I think it's a two-step process. I think it's a down and dirty study looking at the site alternatives as to what's recommended in the report to see if it can fit with all the constraints that are there. Egress, water, septic, is there enough land to make that happen? Parking, stormwater, and that is, to some extent, a site engineering analysis that needs to be done. Because we know what the size is based upon our new enrollment numbers. We know what a model is for how many square foot you need for a building. Can you fit that on site A or site B of the new school? And then what are the implications of doing that? So that can take place relatively quickly. And if you get a no on that, then you're down to one alternative. If you get a yes that it can work, then our job gets more difficult. Because at that point, we then have to say, are we going to go left or right? And right now, we're not in a position to make that decision until we do that initial site analysis. And I'm using the word feasibility, it's really a site feasibility analysis, not the full-blown feasibility analysis.
That was just wanted to clarify that for the public.
That helps me too. As a layman, I appreciate the clarification because the terms get very similar. So the site feasibility versus the traditional feasibility. James O'Brien?
Just jumping ahead, Dave, I see that you've got something under here for site selection information. Is that relating to what we're discussing right now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And is this a review of something in the past or something that's been current?
No, something that I'm proposing we do as a scope of work.
Okay. All right, thanks. So we're heading in that direction anyway to what discuss.
And I'm gonna, just as a sense of time, I want the audience to participate, but just keep in mind, I do have my stopwatch as I promised, so I'll just keep an eye on everybody. So Mr. Pratt, you raised your hand.
Yes, thank you. Just to let you know, I have my first 10 questions for you guys. But anyways, to pack on what John was saying, I think it's a broader question. It's not so much whether or not, we should build on this site or build on another site. The question is, should we let a decision that was made 65 years ago when we had 1,500 people living in Carver and Route 58 wasn't Route 58, is this the site we want to put a school on for the next 50 years? Because that's what the MSP is telling you to do. You got to have this as the school site for the next 50 years. So that's a broader question to what John's asking, which is wherever we pick the site, it's got to be the site. You can't just make a decision. So should we let something that drove us when we had 10,000 less residents in town, when we didn't have enough students, should this be the site? And that's the question, I think that is the broader question, so. I'm glad you guys are, scoping this this way.
Good point. And with my eye on the agenda, I definitely know Dave's gonna speak to that. We have Sarah with pros and cons too, that'll keep the conversation going. So we're definitely gonna break this down for each other and for the public too. So keep it going. Dan?
So, back to, so on page 36, 37, I think the Collins Center gave us a lot of the criteria and the questions we need to be asking, the pros and cons, so there's a lot of good information here that we can start to draw up and explore upon a little bit more and then decide how much of a factor it really is in making the decision that ultimately we have to do at the end. And then moving on to the funding considerations. So we talked a little bit about this already, page 40. They were starting to show some of the maintenance expenses that have been to date. And I think we already had this discussion earlier about what's really important to factor into the decisions is what are the looming costs that are out there that we're trying to push off and hopefully solve by putting in a new building. So that's a little bit of summary on that page there. And really getting into, on page 41, 42, they really just barely touched upon some ideas for funding. Again, they really didn't get to spend a lot of time in this area, and so that's going to be a challenge for us. Again, as I said, once we solve the site issue, it's really going to be a hard focus on how do we minimize the expense as best as possible for the taxpayers so that we can get something to happen, because unfortunately we've been too long not being able to get anything to happen. So the actions, just to summarize real quickly, that I came out of here was weigh the merits of renovation against the risks to budget and timeline. It might be worthwhile if we could possibly look at other school districts that have gone through the same process with the MSBA and chose to renovate and had similar type construction and see what the lessons learned for those sites were. So as a subcommittee or something, maybe some of us could get in touch with some other projects and just find out how did it turn out.
There's 3, right? Pembroke, Silver Lake, and Duxbury. So
Okay.
there's some real close.
They all did renovations?
They all did renovations with some new additions
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
in the past 10 years.
Rockland, yeah.
Rockland, yeah.
Serious one.
And then there's a couple of things which I can send out after as a summary, but they, you know, if we do keep with this site, there was a question about the traffic engineering study and the curb cuts. I don't know if you read that in here, but they had a couple of suggestions on, you know, keeping with option B3 that they thought that we needed to further look into and close on.
That's something East Bridgewater is running into right now. When they built their new school, they built the one driveway which buses could barely get in, so they've got to now go back and spend money in renovating what they just rebuilt too, so really
That's important.
making sure we're
And it
focused
might be
on
worth,
those finite details, yeah.
We had 2 certified traffic studies, but because the engineer did not put his stamp on them, Monica wouldn't accept them. But they are certified traffic studies, so we can review those. But because he didn't, they don't do that till you go get the permit, in case you make any, but she wouldn't take them, you know, but design partnerships and so it would be worth even doing a 3rd one if we don't make any mistakes, but we do have the studies.
and Rockland did do a one school solution for a 2-school problem, and we went there at one point on a site visit.
Yeah.
Dick was there as well.
Yeah.
I think it was John Rogers was the person that
Yeah, the
showed
old
us around.
superintendent.
We could probably, I think he
Yeah.
mentioned that he'd come and talk to
He
us.
would.
And meet with us, and we could hear right from his mouth as to what challenges he went through.
John Retchless, the superintendent.
No,
He
this
was
was
retired superintendent.
retired.
He was my superintendent.
John Rogers.
Right, but, yeah, but John, oh, maybe he come back. But they were accepted in the pipeline the same year we were, and were given the 2 building option, 1 building solution for a 2 building problem. So they were right in this from the very beginning.
But he went through the whole process, and he was very familiar with
Yes.
all the little ins and
Yes.
outs that John's
I
talking
remember,
about.
yeah.
You know, so he would be a good resource person for us.
And ultimately, that was a successful project,
Mhm.
Rockland.
They gave us a lot of their science tables that were only 2 years old. We got 22 lab tables from them for free. We went to their yard sale.
Are you all set, Dan?
Set unless there's questions.
Any other, questions for Dan or any comments? We're gonna move, after this, don't forget, we're gonna do a timeline review. Dave's gonna talk to us about site selection information.
Dan, I just have one question for you, about the comment, early on in your presentation about talking way back when with some of the residents that were not necessarily for a new school. They understood the need, but they were looking for more creative ways to finance. And I'm just wondering what the response was when, assuming you discussed the MSBA process and how much of a percentage that includes to kind of relieve the burden off of the taxpayer from the get-go. So I'm just wondering how that was received.
I don't think it was so much the MSBA percentage. It was, again, at the end, after we subtracted off the estimate of what the building was going to be at the time, was $45 million.
Yeah.
And then when we subtracted off and looked at, I think it was about an $18 million bond that the residents would have to look at covering. And so we were looking at it in terms of, we broke it down to the actual tax dollar increase.
Yeah.
And so we did like the pain chart, where we went up and down the pain chart to see where the wincing was happening, to try to kind of get that ballpark of what people felt was in the ball. You know, they knew that they had to contribute. I mean, I think the residents, you know, they weren't saying they wanted it for free. They knew that there was going to have to be some kind of a tax increase to pay for it, but it was where the comfort zone was. And then again, back to, is the town doing everything in the budgets and in every possible way to reduce the costs? Show us that, and is what they were saying. And then, you know, they wouldn't complain, in other words. They weren't really, I mean, nobody, there's a lot of, so I always break it into a couple of areas, you know. There's a bunch, there's the group that's gonna be for it no matter what. They're gonna come up with the money and they're just gonna say, we have to do this. Then there's gonna be the group that's never gonna say, they're gonna always say, we just can't afford anything. You know, we can't even raise our taxes by $1. And then it's that in-between piece, you know, that we're really trying to work with to say, how much of that in-between piece do you help pass the pain to be able to afford to do this, that's going to support moving forward. And that's how we kind of took it and tried to work with residents. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
All right. Any other thoughts, comments, questions? on this topic. We're gonna have a couple more topics, we'll have some good questions. And I just want to keep repeating, I love the fact the makeup of this board has so many people that are, I mean, everybody's interested in this, in having this project that's desperately needed, completed, but in a fiscally responsible way. Just talking to each of you, one-on-one, I get that feeling, so I'm very happy about that. All right, next thing is, I got a little piece here, timeline review, and I got about 15 minutes. I don't think it's gonna take 15 minutes, but if you can pull out this handout here, it's this long, colorful one. It's our timeline. I've got the right one? Yeah, excellent. And this kind of hit home with me because even though we've been working on this project for years, you know, and it is a slow process, but when I look at this timeline, we have a very short window in my opinion. So let me just kind of explain this to you. The timeline is pretty simple. We got the top row has the dates, you know, May of this year, June, July, all the way through November. The next row has all the dates that the MSBA actually meets. So we got, you know, June 4th meeting, July 30th, September 24th, November 19th. Now, in order for us to incorporate any of Carver's information at one of their meetings, we have to have stuff submitted for a certain date. So that's on the next row. You know, for the June meeting, we'd have to have stuff by April 17th. For the July meeting, we'd have to have stuff in by June 12th, and so forth. By the September meeting, we gotta have all our stuff in by August 7th, and by the November 19th meeting, we gotta have it in by October 2nd. So it kind of squeezes it like an accordion, in my opinion. If you go to the left-hand side again, we'll go down, and you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4 things that we've done. And what's that abbreviation, Liz? Initial comp cert?
Initial compliance certification.
Thank you, so simple, but I blew that one.
Okay.
But March 4th, you know, that's already been submitted. The school building committee, our names have been submitted by April 3rd. Enrollment, now that's today, May 5th. That's a success.
Success.
And program info, May 5th, another success.
They're all submitted online.
So these are things that are done, which is great. But you also see there's things we still gotta do. Looks like the maintenance and capital information has to be entered.
No, it's already submitted. We submitted it
Ah.
on the 3rd, but it's not due
I gotcha.
until August 1st.
How bold is this submitted?
Beautiful. And look at that, even though it doesn't have to be submitted until August 1st, it's already submitted. So that's another good news, thank you. Now the big one, which we were kind of hinting at with our discussion, is highlighted in yellow, the school site decision. Not made, we haven't made that decision yet, we gotta talk this over and make a decision, whether it's the current site renovation or the new site, the new school. Gotta pick a designer and an owner's project manager. See, there's a local vote at town meeting or a special town meeting, and then the feasibility study agreement. So we got some things to do, but it can't go on forever, you know? And like, it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, Liz, we gotta get a lot of stuff done by the September 24th meeting, the MSBA meeting.
Most importantly, we have to have the local vote by October 30th and the signed feasibility study agreement with MSBA. So that requires us to do it before October 30th. So that means we would have to submit on August 7th for, say that we're coming to the meeting, or we could ask them if we could submit on October 2nd, as long as we had it in submission for the November meeting, which is, I'm pretty sure they'd say yes to me.
Yeah, so a couple of choices there.
Yeah.
But still a short window. So that's the timeline. It's a good tool to reference and help us keep on track.
Everything in blue is MSBA required deadlines, and the things in Carver Cranberry is when we actually already did something
Excellent.
or needed it.
Yeah, thank you for putting this together. Very nice. All right, any questions about that, the timeline review? All right, keep it handy. But that just kind of shows you, I mean, it's not as much time as we would like to have. I mean, we got to get things done, we got to meet regularly, and we're off to a great start. Okay, let's keep going. Now, next we have Dave Siedentop's here. And we got site selection information, and you're gonna talk about two things, Dave. The review of the meeting with JC Engineering, and then the review of the hazmat studies. Okay, great, thanks.
So last week, we had a meeting with JC Engineering out of Wareham, who we've engaged with, worked with before. And the purpose of that is to see, as we've discussed, we need to know, we have to make a decision where the school is going to be built. And so now we need to find out, well, if the high school, middle school site, is that an option? So one piece of that pie is to do with the drinking water wells and the wastewater. So I have here a proposal for a scope of work, which I received Friday evening from them, which comes to the sum of $7,500 for what I asked them to look at. And what that entails is engineering services, and it is to look at, I have to provide them with some information, some I've given them, I have to follow up with a couple more things. It entails the drinking water and the wastewater. On the wastewater, I asked them to do two studies. One is the wastewater treatment plant needs to undergo some upgrades because of DEP, and also because of the DEP mandates that they're asking. Those are not going to be implemented into the existing plant because of the age of the plant. So we're looking at a new wastewater treatment plant at the high school. So one phase of the study is to, okay, if I have to redo this plant needs to be rebuilt, brought up to DEP's discharge permit. Today, what's going to have to be done, what's going to need to be done to the plant, what's going to be done to the discharge field, how is that going to impact the drinking water. That's one scope. The second task is to, okay, if we are possibly going to build a roughly the same size population, put another school on this site, how is that going to impact my plant? What is the plant going to have to be designed for then, for that number of population? I won't say students because it's students and teaching staff, so we'll call it population. So that is the second part. And the third task is to look at the well and to see, because around as we don't have utilities in Carver, we are on a drinking well, and we also discharge our septic there. So around your drinking water well, there's what's called wellhead protection. And DEP looks at everything and mandates what your wellhead protection is. Our current one is a radius of 800 feet around the well. Now, part of the new treatment plant requires that we're going to have to relocate the discharge field presently from where it is. And that is called the discharge field is this SAS, the soil absorption system. So that is going to have to be relocated. So that is also...
Whether or not we build a new school or not?
Correct. So we're going to need a new SAS, whether it's for the plant as is or for a plant serving two buildings. So that's to deal with the wastewater. On the drinking water, I asked them to look at, given the, let's say the option of two schools engineer the wastewater plant, now do I have room for another well on that site? Because within that, so they have to size a new radius for a new well, which there's regulations as far as you cannot have any impervious surface, no blacktop, things of that nature. Even though that's a large site, tends to get small rather quickly. And the other option is if we don't have room for a second well on that site, can we go for a modification on the existing well, which may be, let's say instead of having two 800 radius wells, maybe we could go for an enlargement of the existing. That's DEP will tell us whether that's acceptable or not. There's now to talk about the pros and cons. I would much rather have, if we're going to have two schools there, I'd much rather have two wells. The con being, if I have two buildings on one well and I have a well go down, now
might have 2 buildings with no water. If I'm on 2 wells and I have 1 well go down, well, maybe I only have to go to school for 1 day for 1 building, not the entire district. So that's kind of a pro and con.
We
looking
have
at it.
2 wells on this site.
Yes, yes, because these were built previous to today's protection area. And on this site, we would go to 1 well for 1 building, grandfathered in on certain things. So that's where we stand. So to move forward with this, this needs to be signed by someone, and if we want to move forward with this. So I guess I'm asking the committee, is this something we want to, have done?
Well, those wells, are they gravel packed wells is out there?
At the high school, yes, it's a shallow well.
Yeah, so typically they usually have with the public water supply, they usually have 2 wells next to each other. They alternate, so you're not typically sucking out of one. Usually there's 2 well point systems.
We're on a large aquifer over there, so I don't think draining is, I have all the numbers given into them, but I don't know.
So if you have that kind of water, well, I don't want to get off track, but if you have that kind of water, what's the capacity issue then for the second well?
I don't think it's so much a capacity issue as the wellhead protection area. I think that's more of the issue.
Do you mean how many gallons per second it's pumping? So, Tink, Robert Tinkham said that right now it meets the standard for the 12 to 1,300 people we have in the building every day. It meets the and I don't have those figures right with me, but Bob Tinkham does. So it is in some ways a capacity, but perhaps, but they're gonna look into it if we decide to hire these people to say, could that well be expanded,
Right, the possibility of expanding the existing permit, discharge permit. That well is permitted for a population of 1,200, which I'm very close to right now, and 20,000 gallons per day.
Well, when you're permitting under 100,000 gallons, it's not as bad as when you go over that, But that's interesting that they require 800 feet. Typically, it's 400.
This is,
I've always seen 400 in all the projects I've done myself.
It's new regulations.
Yeah.
They were always 400, but now within the last 4 years, it's changed to 800 in public buildings.
Mr. Ward, is this related to what they're talking about? Because Steve has something to say too.
Yeah, wastewater.
All right, Mr. Ward first, then we'll go to Steve.
A wastewater plant, you have to do a new wastewater plant for the high school, junior high school now.
yes.
If you added another school, would the increase in the wastewater plant be twice as much money?
That's part of the study.
They're gonna tell us.
They're gonna give us.
I mean, if it would increase the cost of the wastewater plant by 25% or 50% instead of 100% increase.
But isn't it underused right now?
It is, and that's not always a good thing.
Right.
It's not good to be oversized, and I don't know what the sizing, that's part of the engineering study, will tell us what they, what size should be built and at a hard cost figure. That's part of the scope.
And I think what you also said is the discharge area needs to be rebuilt and relocated no matter what.
Correct.
Which was a big cost before.
Right.
So that's not caused by the new school, that just has to happen.
Yeah.
And then we have to build the infrastructure to pipe it to wherever the new
Yes.
location's gonna
Yes.
be.
And-
So with that, if I just finish with
Yeah.
that, it's probably highly unlikely it'll be double. Because in essence, what you're dealing with is a new discharge area's gotta be built no matter what. But then you have to deal with the mechanics of the building and upgrade
Right.
all of those things, where then you may be dealing with,
Yeah.
upgrades versus completely building 2 systems.
Right.
There's huge economies of scale by combining that.
So,
Just so-
Barry,
I was
you-
thinking that.
Yeah, go ahead, listen, I'll be over in a second.
when we built a new middle school and renovated and built new to the high school in Silver Lake to replace the wastewater treatment, and this was 2006, so this is a long time ago, was 1.6 times the amount that would cost for just one. So that was 2006 numbers. So it'll be interesting to see, maybe it has gotten cheaper, What's changed is the amount of nitrogen that we're allowed to load. the nitrogen loading, and it's because the regulations have become more specific on the amount of nitrogen that we're allowed to load. So that's what's the major problem with our wastewater treatment plant, so.
Mhm. And we talked a little bit about this at school committee
Yeah.
meeting too.
Mhm.
All right, Steve Pratt from the
I
audience.
have two questions, or statements, I should say. First thing is, Silver Lake is a middle school, high school. An elementary school only requires 8 gallons per day per person because they're not taking showers or anything like that. Where a middle high school requires 20 gallons per day. This is something I was looking at 4 years ago when we were discussing if not to do this. In terms of the 800 feet, you're right, John. The existing radius for this privately approved existing protected radius is 350 feet. The zone 2, which is the no-build zone, is 400 feet. That's what Dave was talking about is the interim wellhead protection area, and that only applies if you don't have an approved DEP zone. Because if you had an 800-foot radius, that would take up 46 acres of a 123-acre site. If you put 2 of those on there, that would take up 92 acres. Because that's what 800 square, it's an 800-foot radius, pi r squared, is when it comes to acreage. So we don't have an 800. In fact, if you had an 800 today, the existing high school is within that radius. So we do need an engineering study. We should look at this for what it is. We got a 123-acre site. Because I don't know about you, but just give me some logic here. If we have a problem putting an elementary school, another building on a 123-acre site, why don't we have that same problem putting it on a 23.7-acre site? That's my whole point here. And we don't have a wastewater treatment plant here. We have a septic field. So you start, please explain to me how that makes logical sense, why that's not good and this is, from an engineering perspective. That's why I
We
want.
weren't saying that it wasn't good. We're saying we were grandfathered in here. That they did the whole study, and because when this was approved, it didn't have the same well protection site. And this is what this is gonna tell us at the high school. But we were told with the previous study that JC, that we would have to have the 800.
Well, the 800 feet is the interim wellhead, and that can have non-pervious surface. It's the 400 that has to be 100% pervious. You can't, no build, no nothing.
Well, that's
So
what we
that's
get the
what we need to
engineers to
study.
tell us, and we're
My
not saying
opinion.
it's bad, we're just saying it's just a factor to consider.
Yeah, we're weighing all the pros and the cons out. So good, thanks for your feedback, Steve. And
You got a
keep
question,
breaking it
Kevin,
down.
too?
Yeah, who's first? John, Dan?
Go ahead.
Quick question, can you get a scope of work from JC to hand out to us, just to list exactly what's to be
Yeah, I have right here,
accomplished?
I can make copies.
If you could, that'd be great.
It's kind of part of my question too, does the $7,500 include both solving the existing wastewater issue and also the ability to look at this site as adding more to it? So that's definitely covered under the 7,500, looking at both.
I mean, there's a limit to what they're gonna do for $7,500.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, just so you know, you don't get a hell of a lot.
That seems a lot,
for $7,500.
a lot to get done for
I just want you to know that.
Yeah, Mike?
Yeah, a couple things, and I heard in here too, is to determine what type of modification would be allowed, which obviously DEP would have to modify them. You know, I think we need to establish a policy too with the committee as far as, you know, how we go forward with hiring engineering services or other services. You know, are we gonna bid that out, or are we just going to go to, you know, the local guy, which is fine, we just as a committee need to determine that. I would also like to go to DEP and you know, further explore with them and the right decision makers as to what flexibility a public project would have on a site-constrained site that the town may determine may be the best alternative for locating a school, or may not. But it's not the canned rules that apply to a private development, because the town only has limited resources. When I say that, I mean limited land to satisfy a need of educating its children. And as a result of that, DEP can modify certain things under certain conditions. And I think that needs to be included as part of the scope of work. And again, I'm a strong believer, and particularly with this project, that any work that gets done going forward that should be bid out, we should put together a scope of work, bid it out, and get the most qualified price and get the work done. So it's completely transparent in the whole process. And I appreciate the work you did, because this is one of many issues that need to be solved. But I also don't want to get into a piecemeal approach too, where, you know, we want to make sure that this money, whatever is spent, whether it's $7,500 or $15,000, is reimbursed by MSBA. Going through and just approving it tonight, I'm not sure it will be. But if we put it into our project, and it's one of the items that has to be done in this analysis, it will be reimbursed. And, you know, I'll take 60 cents on the dollar any day.
So, the one thing is, that scope of work, whether we use JC or, there's dozens of engineering firms that can do it. We also got a quote from somebody else just over the phone of $100,000, so I'm sure there'll be a price range. But, did include shopping it to the DEP. That did include going to DEP with the existing plans and asking, that's what.
When did that happen and who was involved? Just because I just like to know.
What I'm saying is, that is part of the work that
Oh.
they will do, is go with us to DEP, whoever the us
It's
is.
part of JC's scope.
That's part of JC's scope.
No, I did hear that in there. What I'm suggesting is actually the reverse, is that we as the community go to DEP first to discuss this issue, understand what flexibility we may or may not have, and then write the scope accordingly to include what DEP wants to look at before we go out and do this, because this is going to be a critical piece, whether a new school is built there or not, because you still have to rebuild the septic system. So, you know, I don't know, maybe I've just been involved in too many large NEPA permitting processes.
No, I think.
So I'd like to get DEP
I
involved
think
really
one of
well.
the problems right now is that we may have some other instances like this. We are setting a precedent, and we want to keep it as open as we can to those folks out there. They got to know that we're going for the best price on every single step. So I don't see as we got a choice.
Yeah.
Well, if you have a scope that's running from 7,500 to 100,000, that's a red flag right there. So I think we need to have a definitive scope.
Specifics, right?
Because $7,500 doesn't buy a lot in engineering, unfortunately.
I mean, what I'd be willing to do is to set up a meeting with DEP before our next meeting in 2 weeks with Dave and Dick and whoever else wants to come and try to get some clarity on this, to refine the scope and work with Dave and others to put together a quick little RFP and get out on the street.
Well, Dave's our authorized operator, so for both the wells and the one reason we just wanted to get a ballpark from one company to bring to this meeting, so we know what kind of time and pricing we're looking at.
That's good for staff.
But, the reason we went to JC is because they did the study of the wastewater treatment plant, so they wouldn't, that's one of the reasons it's not as expensive, is because we already spent a ton of money,
I'm not saying that.
you know, on the wastewater. They did the study that told us that we had to get it replaced, so that's, you know, that's why it's not as much as it might have been.
If we can get a ton of work done for $7,500, I'm all for it.
All right, so what does the board think? What's the committee think? We're gonna go forward with that suggestion? Is that something that has to be?
That Michael meets with the DEP
Yeah.
first, and then we scope it out.
Yeah.
Sure.
Makes
I need a
sense.
motion,
Do I think I'd like a motion in a second.
so moved.
Second.
All right, discussion, John?
No, it's just saying all.
Oh, here it comes, I'm coming right now. You're a little jumping the
Sorry.
gun there.
I'm
Well,
just
I
trying
want
to
some
move-
discussion. We had some good discussion, so I think we've all talked out on this topic, unless I'm mistaken.
Hold the question.
Are we gonna,
Hold the question.
yeah, I'm moving it, yes, I'm moving it, Mr. Ward. It's like I'm back in gym class. Right. The old dodgeball, right?
So Michael and a group of
Yeah,
volunteers will
including
meet
Dave.
DEP.
So at least Mike and Dave, and anybody else is welcome.
Anyone else that wants to join us, let us know.
All right, so all in favor of this?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
And all opposed? All right, looks like it's unanimous.
Mike, that would be kind of you letting everybody know.
I would volunteer to go along if it works out with timing.
Okay, great. So Mike can keep in touch with you. And we got John Delicate's building as well.
I'd be willing to go along
Okay.
if the timing works out, Mike. I mean,
So
subject
I
to,
think we get Dave, Sarah, myself, you, and take
Some things
to
out.
town hall, and everyone can make it.
but
Obviously, Dave's gotta be there, and we'll go from there.
Super. Thanks, guys.
Good
Thanks.
stuff.
All right, and so Dave, you're still going with your topic? We had two for you. Did you kind of combine them, or are you doing?
Yeah, no, so that was the scope of work for that. And the next one was
The hazmat.
hazmat. Yes, I brought copies, everyone has copies of, back when the project was going earlier on through Daedalus, who was our OPM, they had brought in a firm to do a hazardous materials identification survey. So what you have here, this document, is that multi-page report on what they felt all the areas to hit were as far as identifying hazardous material. And the big ones they were looking for, I'm not going to go through the whole report, was asbestos, there was lead, and PCBs. And as you can see in the report, they looked at window caulking, they looked at flooring, they looked at walls, they looked in ceilings, they looked at materials on structural steel. They pretty much tried to hit every area that they could as far as identifying hazardous materials within the buildings. So that's what this report entails.
Dave, just for clarification, the school is safe now, everything's
Yes.
encapsulated.
Yes.
Even though they found some asbestos, it's not,
Right.
it's encapsulated, it's
Yes.
only an issue when the building's torn down, it's not a building while
Right.
an issue while the building's operating.
No, it's not an issue while the building is occupied. Actually, by federal regulations, every year we do what's called a HERA report. We keep up on every 3 years. We have a company come in and they do a full investigation of what they work off the previous ones. They want to know what was any work done in those areas where we do have known hazardous material. So that has to be, we have to be in compliance with that. Thank you. We provide any documentation if any work was done. For example, if you had to remove, we do have some VATs, which are vinyl asbestos tile in the front building. So if we had to disturb a certain size area, that would have to, we can't do that as a district. I don't have anyone on hand, so that would have to be an abatement, which means I would have to contract that out with a certified contractor to come in and do that work. So any of that documentation we provide to show them that all the proper, procedures were followed. So that is kept up with. We don't, only time we disturb it, a couple times I've had, in the front building that is a steam system, which means I have return pipes in the floors, which are covered by some of that vinyl asbestos tile. So if I have a steam leak in the floor, before I can actually fix the steam leak, I have to have an abatement done. It's happened a couple times. So things of that nature, documentation on paperwork is big on that. Don't touch anything or disturb anything. But we know what the hazards are. Obviously, this report went much further in depth as to identify are there any hidden things, and that's what you're trying to identify. Years ago, there was a lot. They look at window glazing. That's known to have PCBs now. That's a big red flag. Floor tiles, pipe covering, rubber floors, structural steel covering for the stuff they sprayed on years ago for fire retardant, things of that nature. So that is all in this.
Dave,
I know you don't want me to read
I
it.
just got a question about that. So that just kind of strikes me when we're thinking about this, like the pros and cons, and the renovation, the unknown factor? I mean,
Well,
has
that's
something been
the-
studied where we
That's
know
the
where all
purpose
this
of-
stuff is?
Yes, and that's the purpose of this, is so you're trying to litigate so you don't have any unknowns. And that's what this does, and that was the reason for it.
I mean,
Okay.
is this a comprehensive study of that? I mean, is
I
this,
believe so, yes.
not that there will never be unknowns, but
Right.
Mr. Chairman?
It's
John?
everything is up to the MSBA requirements. You can't do a renovation or addition project without going through this laborious
right.
thing.
John?
I just want to make sure when we're looking at all this, you know, today is talking about today's codes. You have seismic codes that weren't in place when Dick built the school. So you have seismic issues that will have to be addressed and retrofitted. And who knows what the geotechnical aspect
There's another report here, that's the geotechnical
Of
liquefaction.
of what's underneath.
Yes,
Today.
that was done. Well, it was done in 2011,
So we know what's under the footings
yes.
and the compaction. So
Yep. Yep, and if you didn't get a copy, there are copies
No,
of that.
So this report was done in 2011.
Yes.
It showed about 475,000 of anticipated cost at that time. And
That was folded into the architects and
Sure.
OPM's costing.
do you recall what they, of the 475,000, what they added for contingency in their analysis?
I'd have to go back and look, I can recall.
We have all those figures, I can get them to you.
What type of impact is that like, as a layman? Like the contingency, what are you talking about?
Well, the okay. The contingency is, this is the estimated cost at that point in time, 2011, for $475,000 to do the remediation for these two buildings. Now, with environmental work, there's a high, particularly with renovations, you would use a higher contingency, a percentage of additional costs that you would budget in your budget just in case you find some issues that would be in there. So I'm not sure what the current trend is for environmental remediation, but I know it's higher than normal stick construction costs, which would, have a less of a contingency, but still have a contingency, because you're always going to find unknowns. So it's basically your, to answer your question, I know what you're answering is, it's your reserve fund if you run into a problem.
They're gonna add an influx factor.
I like that.
MSBA has a whole schedule of contingencies as a percent of the total project that they fold into their required scope and budget. So they won't even let you get away with not having enough, they have their required amount. The OPM will tell us what they would put aside, the designer, and then MSBA, and then somehow they meld them all together and come up with an agreed upon contingency.
Excellent. All right, thank you, everybody. All right, anything else, Dave?
No? And if anybody wants soil samples, I still have about 40 jars, John, from the liquefaction testing. I have all the soil samples in my office still.
Did you look at, on the last go-around, did you look at the seismic retrofit?
I don't recall. I'd have to go back. It was 3 years ago now, so.
Because that will be required.
It was part of the whole overall scope of the investigation, for sure, because we actually did part of that twice between the first estimate and when we came up with the 41 million, and then we had to do it again when we came up with the second estimate. So we have two of them, so of the seismic.
Is this building, not having looked at it, is this structural masonry or a steel structure with masonry curtain wall?
Front building? Of course, I'd have to look. I don't, off the top of my head, I don't
Because
want
that
to say.
makes a big difference in the seismic to fix it.
Okay. I don't want to answer off the top of my head. I'm pretty sure, but I don't
We
want to
should
say.
see if I could look at it with you if you want.
I have all that in my office, but I don't want to say me not being 100% sure.
And Mary, the other thing, just so people have a list of what was done in studying feasibility for this building, this tells you all the studies, so if you have a question about any of the studies, this is what you can ask Dave or I for, and we can get it to you.
I had one other question. When you're talking about water for this site, right?
Yep.
Right now you have on-site wells, I noticed on this 21E report or whatever it is, that you have 2 wells in back there.
For here,
Right.
yes.
Is there any other place to get water here other than here? Public water supply that's currently existing, maybe off-site, that's publicly controlled or not?
No. No, we don't have town water running.
So how does the town hall get their water?
On a well. They're on a well that
Right.
serves all that area. They're combined in with the library, I believe the housing council.
So when you looked at the, I'm just trying to figure out what's already been done, so I'm not just repeating, but when you looked at the prior redevelopment, did you look at seeing if there was enough capacity or an upgrade in that existing public water supply to be able to come over here?
No.
The reason I ask that is because that might make a difference of how much development could be done on this site, which then might allow a new school to be built on this site simultaneously with this existing school here.
It was not.
So you might want to look at that.
I don't,
So you don't have one alternative, you may have 2, that's all.
So that actually, to me, just listening to this, sounds like there'd be 3 alternatives, right? Because we have 2 kind of on the table we're mulling about, and you just came up with something new.
Right, well, the big constraint is when you have these radiuses, whatever they are, all right, on the sites, and when you try to jam your septic system and your water supply and your building and an existing building all when it gets tight. Whereas if you can get the well off-site somewhere on an existing permitted public water supply, and that doesn't mean, it's confusing, these public water supply nomenclature. Public water supply simply means it's not for private, it's public. It doesn't mean a town like you built in North Carver necessarily. If you follow what I'm saying, it's right, but it's, you're feeding town hall, there's the senior center behind there, or whatever it is, the library, I assume, some of those other buildings, maybe the police and fire.
right. I don't know who operates that. Is that a town hall?
It's a town as
Well.
well.
So you may want to just look at that and see what could that, maybe that could be upgraded as such, there's enough output. Maybe there's enough output now, I don't know.
Pipe over here.
Well, you're ripping out 58 right now, throw a sleeve across. And, isn't the state doing some kind of renovation on 58 that we're talking about? So we could ask that a sleeve be put in to leave that alternative open. So we're not, we don't pave the street on Monday and rip it out on Friday, so,
2 years ago, we did a 14-inch run underneath 58 up by Shaw's without touching the road,
Well, you
directional
jacked it.
drilling.
Yeah, you jacked it.
So we're gonna do a little one for here.
Well, you get the right soil for it.
Thanks, John, I appreciate that.
John, I just want to clarify, so I understand what you're saying. What I think you're saying is that this site has obviously constraints because of the wellhead protection, and same thing with septic. That, we are already going to be running water to the new proposed fire station, that we could eliminate that constraint, run water down to here, get rid of the wells, build on the wells a new facility, tear down the old building, and then build a new parking lot, another
That's right.
recreation lane or something along those lines.
Well, the thing is, the wells would have been, for all practical purposes, would be as if you had town water
Yep.
on this site, from a development standpoint. Because you no longer have to build that in, and then you could recreate your septic system where it's most feasible. I think we should look at that, because if that offers us the opportunity to build a new building to the site simultaneously to this building being ripped down, then you don't have this relocation problem and all that, It's just an idea.
The septic system's only 4 years old. We did build a new septic.
Okay.
All right. As long as it's a possibility, and it sounds like.
I
a
guess
legitimate
when
thing.
we go to DEP, that's a question that, we can hit at the same time.
Well, we're gonna need to ask that question for the fire station. I'm on that one too.
Right.
So if that's what the plan is. Is that the plan on the fire station?
Yes.
Okay.
Run the water
So,
down.
What is it?
you might want
To
to look at
run the water from across Route 58 to connect to the new fire station. So we would already be, in essence, running some water down. So what that does create is a capacity issue, which I believe there is capacity with some upgrades on the well, that if this provided the opportunity of building new on the site, that it becomes feasible, potentially feasible right now. So that our biggest constraint is going to be the wellheads that are here, and here we could potentially build on them. again, as an option, what you're saying is just something to at least take a quick look at.
Well, while we're looking at these options, these are the things I think, we have to look under all the rocks.
Excellent. Great work, everybody. Super. All right, Dave, you still,
No, I think.
okay, beautiful,
Any
thank you.
other questions?
Any
Done.
other questions for Dave, or everyone's satisfied at this point? All right, I'll keep us going, because the agenda, we're falling a little bit behind, but this is important, so I know we're all willing to do it. The next phase, Dave's gonna help me out. I'm gonna lead it off. Y'all have a nice, I love the colorful handouts, that's what they give me to do. You notice the trend.
You had to pick it up somewhere.
But if you need one, yeah, you can pass those around, you can pass them down. All right. This is the segment we call, we're going to review the school committee report on the capital asset assessment. James and I got this at the school committee, and we thought it was really, well, I know I did, I thought it was great. It'd keep it simple for me, and again, the non-professional, the layman. So Liz put this together, and I'm going to try and talk it out just to break it down quick. I won't spend hours on this, but I like to go, top to bottom, left to right. So if you look at the top, you see all the fiscal years from 2014 all the way up to 2031. So it really looks out into the distance quite a bit, and it kind of talks about, to me, we're the caretakers of all the buildings. I'm thinking from the school perspective especially. So not only are we talking about the elementary school, but at the same time, we do have to think about the future of the middle high school. And so that's where, I don't know what the official colors are, I need my art teacher here, but it looks like pink to me. So, the middle high school would be, in fiscal year 2014, it's going to be about 27 years old. And that would go all the way to 2031, when it's definitely needs to be replaced. Now, it definitely needs to be replaced in 2031, the middle high school. However, I'm not going to jump to the bottom, but Plymouth South was built just a little bit before Carver Middle High School, and that, as you may know, is being, the process is beginning for it to replace that school right now. So again, Carver makes it work, and we get more out of stuff than the typical town. So I think we could make it work till 2031, but in reality, a town right next door is replacing their school that was built about the same time as our school. So going right below that, you see, the Carver Middle High School, repair. If major repairs are not done, replacement will be sooner, but they project a 40-year life there. So below that is this original elementary school project that we picked years ago when we whittled it down from 27 options down to one. It's called, really, we know it as B3. So that's one of the things we've been talking about all night. It's on the table, renovating the existing structures, putting on an addition. If we started in fiscal year 2015, it would open the 2018 school year, the fall of 2018. So that's one option. All the while, just a little bit above that, you see the red, the green, the yellow. We talked about this in the school committee meeting too. As long as the elementary school, this building exists, it still has to be worked on, repaired, and there's some high priority items. So the red is priority one. Dave went over that at the school committee meeting. It's about 19 things on that, millions of dollars to keep it running while it exists. Then the other option we've been talking about so far is this potential new building on a new site. And while we're working on that, possible feasibility, schematic, starting the construction, that would be open probably a year later than a renovation would be open. And of course, we have to continue to fix the existing building. So just, again, for the committee, for the public, want to let you know as much as we can about expenses to build or renovate, but all the while, we're still repairing the existing structures. And again, if Dave wants to chime in at any time, just give me a signal. So then, you go to the next section, you see, just so everyone's aware, the expenditures on this elementary project, the B3, that we were trying to get done in the past, or maybe in the future. It talks about the feasibility study where we had budgeted a certain amount. We budgeted $250 We spent 257, we were reimbursed, so it ultimately cost 118 for the feasibility. Then we went for the schematic design. We budgeted 600, we spent almost 500, and of course, we didn't get reimbursed, so that's how much it costs, about 500 at this juncture. And, you know, if we were to pick the B3 option, maybe we'll get reimbursed for the schematic design that we came up with. Probably likely. We got a green grant, which we received it and we spent it. So we got 53,000, we spent 53,000. So really the green design didn't cost us anything. Elementary septic replacement, budgeted 118,000, didn't get any reimbursement. Maybe it'll be reimbursed if we stuck with the B3 project, the existing site with the existing buildings being renovated. And then the septic engineering study, 3,600 for that. So if you see the cost in bold, at the moment, we've spent 738,000. And maybe we need 100,000 more to do the schematic. So that's where we are with the existing, you know, renovation, addition of this building that we're sitting in right now. Now, the next section is kind of green, and it's talking about the proposed cost for the new project on a new site. Excuse me, and it talks about, you know, what if we did a feasibility, not the site feasibility that we talked about, but the traditional feasibility. Am I right about that, Liz? 250. No reimbursement, because we already did that. Schematic design, we budgeted 600 grand. We get reimbursed, whatever the going rate is right now. Redesign grant, that's not applicable anymore. Talk about wastewater treatment plant. I see from $1 million to $2 million.
Just a
Yeah.
point on that, Barry, too, that's something when we look at that's gonna have to be done no matter what. So whether we're talking a new build up there, or just in general in the builds over here, that's still gonna need to be spent on the wastewater treatment plant.
Correct.
Regardless.
True.
And Barry, I think, just to pick up on that, I think this is one of these types of documents we need to be very cautious when we present, because there's information on here that's not accurate. And an example is, you just mentioned the feasibility study, and it's not gonna be reimbursed for the new site. It would be reimbursed, we've already been told by MSBA it would be.
Because you brought that up at the school committee meeting too.
Absolutely.
And so I see both sides, I hear on both sides.
So,
I'm hearing
yeah,
from Liz, I'm hearing from you, two different things. But we got a letter though.
But see, that's where we need to be
Yeah.
careful when we present this. And then we're looking at here at the wastewater treatment plant that's being assigned. Well, if you move the school over there, now all of a sudden it's gonna cost you $1 million for septic. But we just heard right here, you've gotta do a lot of this work anyway. So the intent of this document is to get to a bottom line, which is the $1.85 million, and saying, well, it's gonna be, look at all this more work we've gotta do for this project, when in fact, those numbers aren't necessarily true.
So,
And you look at the green here, so this isn't a factual piece, because it's if this, then that, if this, then that, questions that are here. And again, I'm just gonna caution, as I did the school
Yeah,
committee meeting,
yeah.
so I'm repeating myself, is that, you know, this is good, I like this page.
That's coming next, yeah.
That says what's there, but these equations, this if, then, this, that, is really, we need to be very cautious when we release information, because that $1.85 million is not an accurate number.
So let me hear Liz's side too, because I trust her a lot, and she's done a lot for the schools, and she has, you know, the business analyst there too. So tell me what is going on here, Liz.
in a letter that MSBA wrote to us in December 1st of 2010, it told us that our project was no longer open with them. It said that the MSBA believes that the next steps for the town should be as follows. Number one, the town must complete the schematic design for the preferred schematic option approved at the September 30th, 2009 meeting of the MSBA Board of Directors. Two, if the town chooses to consider an option different from that approved previously by the MSBA, then the town should work with its designer to resubmit its feasibility study for a new preferred schematic solution in accordance with MSBA's Module 3. Please note that the costs associated with a new feasibility study would not be eligible for reimbursement by the MSBA, because the MSBA already has reimbursed the town for the feasibility study conducted in 2009. If the MSBA staff were to accept the newly developed preferred solution, the newly proposed preferred schematic solution would have to be approved by MSBA before the town entered the schematic design phase. So that's what's in writing. I'm not trying to present false information, I'm just going on what I have in writing from MSBA and signed by the Director of Capital Projects.
And I'm not presenting that you're presenting, I'm not saying you're presenting false information. This is correct information in 2010. We're now in 2014, MSBA's changed its process. We had a meeting with MSBA, I've had multiple follow-up conversations that they have said they're looking at this as the previous proposed project. Any new work is eligible for reimbursement, including the light or heavy feasibility study for the new high school. So again, I don't want anyone to leave here thinking that 2010 letter before MSBA changes regulations is still consistent.
But we didn't, that wasn't what they said at the meeting that Heather and I and you and Dick went to. So if you had a conversation with them that they
It's
changed
in my
their mind?
notes that that's what they said, that the feasibility piece
No, I
was
just-
there. Because
Okay,
we
it
didn't,
was something we probably need to seek a
We definitely gotta get this straight.
I think as a committee, I'd like to see something updated anyway. I'd like to see a modern statement that addresses that issue.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, it's easy enough, they will definitely tell us. But I've been told 6 times, that go read this letter.
and I believe you have been told 6 times since 2010. But at our meeting, I asked the question twice, is that we still need to study the other alternative.
Right.
And they said we could do that. Our issue was the thing, you just need to figure out the level of effort. It could be a small $50,000 or $100,000 study to look at a new site, which they would participate in reimbursement. And it could be larger, depending upon how that goes. So, you know, when I just see something that says no, and then it comes up to $1.85 million, and there's $1 million embedded in there from a wastewater treatment plant that we just heard, it has to be done anyway. Why is that assigned to the new project? It isn't black and white, and we really as a committee need to be black and white. I've said enough.
Dan?
And the other, I'm still a little confused about, if we're a building committee and we're trying to put out factual information, how come we never got to look at this before it got
Because
put
it
out?
was a-
This seems like it's a,
It's a
I'm
school
just
committee
finishing,
report.
because this is talking about expenditures for B3 and the proposed cost for a new building. It seems like something the building committee should at least get to review and look at to help to make accurate before it gets out there.
Are you talking about the building committee or this elementary building?
This
Yeah, because we got it
itself.
first at the school committee. Now we're
Exactly,
bringing
and I'm
it to this.
asking why this committee didn't review this ahead of time. And first, it seems to me that as a building committee, it's our job to put this out, not to perceive it. You know what I mean? To make sure it's accurate, and it just seems like it's,
Right, well, the superintendent also works for the school committee, and she does things like that for the school committee, so that, she's always trying to help, of course.
Okay.
So, but we gotta all get on the same page, so that's important.
So I think this document would be helpful if we can just get the accurate information.
So maybe as a committee, we could tweak it and whatever everyone agrees with. You know, because that's what we're just trying to get us all informed, whether we're expert in the matter or new to, you know, these types of things, get us all on the same page. All right. So this, I'm not going to go through line by line. This does attempt to break it all out. Again, this is something that, again, strikes me. I know a lot of us have been here a long time, but I feel, and a lot of families have been here for centuries, right? But I feel like we're caretakers for the future too. So even though we may or may not live here 10 years from now, 20 years from now, we should be thinking about what's going to happen to the middle high school at the same time. Because again, if it can all be done, wonderful. But if you can't, if we put the elementary school on the middle high school site, what happens when the middle high school does need to be rebuilt? So those types of things we got to think about also. And then Mike, you mentioned you like the next page, which is a breakdown of all the priorities. We did this at the school committee meeting too. Priority 1 is really urgent. And priority 2, important but not as urgent. Priority 3, a little bit more down the line. And priority 4, optional. So it's nice that the administration is breaking this down, and they definitely have a plan in place. So Dave, what do you have to add?
Basically, last year I put out an RFP asking for proposals for a capital assessment at the middle school, high school, and that's what this is. This is basically a breakdown of a 10-year capital plan. For capital outlay in town, I update every year a 5-year needs. report, but this went a little bit further, looked into, it was a little, more comprehensive report of the infrastructure of the middle high school. Because right now I have, some big priorities looming, some expensive projects, and I knew those weren't, just those 3 or 4 I'm focusing on aren't the only ones. There's other things coming behind it. So I wanted an engineering study of what we have. So basically that's what this is.
Okay, great.
And I think one thing, because we have discussed this a lot at school committee, and the consistency of the same items being on there time after time after time. And when you look at most of those in the priority one, they are the high school. So we're talking again, regardless of what we do with this building, these are costs that are added on to whatever we decide to do there. And they have to be addressed before that building becomes like this building. So it's something that we really need to keep in context when we move forward with this idea.
Excellent, excellent. All right. Any other questions from the group? Thoughts?
Well, last question, I guess.
John Carter?
I think we talked a couple times about the model school program, and I know there's a side issue way back when I never built a school size that we need for this town. But I know the population's dropped as well based on the new estimates from the MSBA. So my question was more, can you speak to if a model school would fit this location, would the cost be the same for feasibility and the schematic design? Or would there be less work need to be done?
Feasibility, the cost would be the same because it's studying the site. Schematic design would be less because it's less architect's fees. So at the last talking with MSBA, they have not yet approved a building that would be called a model school for 750 students. Whitman Hanson just finished designing an elementary school. It's doing the same thing we're doing, putting 2 schools together. And they went through, there's a 6-month process to determine if your programmatic needs could be served by a model school. And in the end, they found out, no, they couldn't, because they have too many children and their programs didn't fit the model school. We could go through that process, because in the interim, they could build a school that was big enough for us. But right now, they don't have any. This was as of our meeting in March. I can't remember the date. But, so at that point, the guy that will be our project manager, Chris Cello, he said that in his opinion, Whitman Hanson wasted their time because there wasn't one available. But it did satisfy the needs of their community to figure out, if it was going to do it. But there's still, as of the March meeting, there was still not a model school. And it's somewhere in the Collins report, too.
And I would concur with everything Liz just said. I think the other component that we tried to make a case for is, well, what if we wanted to build a model school and you don't have a product available for us to get the extra bonus points, if you will, the incentive points? And that was something they said that we could, look at discussing in a future date is, why should we be penalized for not being able to build a model school because you don't have one available? And that'll get back into some of our negotiations we'll have as far as the incentive points at the very end.
And they said if it would, if we went through the process, it was gonna be a long time, like a 3-month evaluation, as I recall, right? So it was a kind of a delay type of problem, John, too?
It took Whitman Hanson 6 months to rule it
Oh,
out.
6 months, okay.
All right, John?
I just had one follow-up question. The septic system that was replaced that you mentioned
Here.
on this site.
Yes.
When you're looking at when you're on Route 58 and you're looking at the site, is it on the left?
Yes. When you're facing the schools,
Under the parking lot?
it's behind the parking lot. The old system is under the parking lot.
Right. The new system is to the left?
It's to the left in the field behind it. There's a grass area now.
Okay, and that system,
It's a Presby type system. It's a-
right, like what a power dousing system or something? So that's a 10,000 gallon or less system, right?
Correct.
And would that suffice if
Yes.
the new school was? Okay.
Yes.
It was built to hook up to a new.
Yep, I understand.
And
I was
just
just
going
curious what
back,
it was on the site.
I looked at all my flows at the high school, middle school to see if I could go there instead of a wastewater plant at the high school, middle school. But our numbers, I couldn't do it. Our numbers, I couldn't get it under the required 10,000. Yeah, just because it was so tight that even population year to year, school children moving in, it put me over. So that was ruled out. But I had to look at that and see if we could do it. But it can't be done there.
But Dave, the cost of that system in the Collins report was $300,000. Didn't it come in like half that?
Yes,
Yeah, for
yes. This cost of this field was, I believe, 118,000.
How come
It's
the
in-
disparity between the 300 and the 110?
It depends on.
She took it from the town meeting vote, that
From the
we
Collins
voted to allow the town to borrow up to $300,000, but after all the bids came in, we only spent 118. I sent that as a correction, but didn't quite make it into a fund.
Do you have a site plan available reflecting that I could see sometime?
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so I think we've talked about that thoroughly. I don't want to leave anybody out, but let's keep moving. 9:15, we all have things to do tomorrow. And before I get to Sarah, I just want to make sure, we had a clipboard going around for everyone to sign in, because we just want to record your presence here. So just please, whether you're a committee member or an audience member, please sign it. Because by the time when we close, everyone will probably be rushing to get out of here. And we'll just pass that around. So the next piece, and this is the heart of the meeting, we have the pros and cons to consider in the site selection. We've been having a great talk, great debate, great discussion. And then Sarah Stearns is going to lead this segment. So take it away, Sarah.
Okay. I took the liberty of just making this little, very simple spreadsheet. A lot of this information, Dan touched on his review of the Collins report. A lot of that came from that. Some is
Oh, yeah.
latecomers.
I get it.
So, I mean, we can just kind of quickly go through them, and I can edit as we talk. Delete, add, update. So I guess starting with this site, and this all predominantly relates to the preferred B3. So, first thing, appropriately sized, we have enough acreage on this site to accommodate the new school, whether it's this particular option or whatever. We just talked about the wastewater system, newly replaced, it's appropriately sized. Just kind of quickly going down the list, anybody interrupt if they would like. Grandfathered use and ability to reuse the existing foundation in B3, complying with the setbacks that we've been talking about with wells and wastewater. MSBA incentive points for renovation add to the reimbursement bottom line. And then just kind of talking about time and cost spent on the preferred option, having it narrowed it down from 22 options, in compliance with all of the MSBA modules. The systems would be 100% new. The majority of the building would be new, other than what was the foundations and the steel under the reno part. And, you know, kind of the obvious, going with what's already been done achieves the most streamlined timeline moving forward from this point.
Can I just on that, how does that compare with the construction time? Does that include the extended 30-month construction time?
I mean, I didn't really get into construction on this very simplified view, but we can certainly look at that and discuss it. Not really knowing much about the alternative in terms of construction, there wasn't much to compare it to, so I just kind of left it up at this point. We can note that. The negs, the construction phasing adds, as we discussed, potential for financial risks from the unknown obstacles that may face during renovation. Potential for safety, that was one of, a couple of the things that were noted in that report. School access constraints during construction, and the shuffling of staff and classrooms and all of that was outlined in that table, classroom availability in those items. Portion of the building would be reused, so, you run into unknown issues with what the 1953 building offers. And then this kind of was mentioned a number of times, the location on Route 58, which, I mean, I'm not sure if that's a real issue or not, and I don't know how the rest of the committee feels, but, I mean, maybe they just threw it in there as one more thing for this site, but.
That has been one thing that has never occurred to me in my whole life growing up here as a kid or as a parent. I would, the way it's set back at the moment.
Yeah,
is
I mean,
a good
the
buffer.
people who use the school every day may have a different perspective on that.
You know, in the report they identified that, 58 is a main artery and it was looked at or sort of considered to be a negative. I don't have any incidents or any issues that I can report to you that,
Right.
the most that we get that could be somewhat disruptive is you hear sirens when there's an accident or that's, that's passing by, that's quickly. So I don't see, there are some, we deal with traffic into the school challenges daily, but that's because of what we have right
Present
now.
layout, it's
That's
not-
because of
yeah.
lack of access.
Right.
So as far as Route 58, being a main artery and posing challenges for us, I'm not presented with issues, and I've been here 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, I would tend to agree. I mean, I don't really see it
Yeah, I think
as-
part of it too, they're looking at that it's increasing over time. When I first came here, there was barely a car that would go by,
Yeah.
and when I went to school here, and you could cross the street and not even see cars. But over the years, the truck traffic and the traffic has gotten heavier and heavier to the point that even on 58, I can't even get out of my road anymore. I have to sit there for 10 minutes waiting for the traffic to go by. So I think that was one of the concerns, that it's only going to get worse. It is a central roadway through the town, and it's just something to consider for the future. We're not looking at it for today, we're looking at it for 20, 30, 40 years from now, and how's that going to impact the town and the site issue.
Will the construction of the new 58 with sidewalks and curbings on both sides be a protective measure for the school or not? Sidewalks are going to go all the way to the North Carver Lights on Purchase Street, and all the way down to South Meadow Road. And double sidewalks on both sides, all the way down to the auto body shop down there. So the whole area in front of the school will be sidewalks on both sides.
So, I don't know if anyone has anything else they'd like to add to that. Again, I've pulled most of that information from the Collins report and discussions.
I think the point prior before the busy street, the one about the existing building, I think what they were trying to have us, and this is a good question, was there a study done on the facade and how structurally sound it is and what the life expectancy of it is? So what they were trying to get at is when you spend all this money and you do a brand new school, everything's brand new except for that facade. So if that only is going to last another 10 years, are we running into a problem? So I think that's what they wanted us to study, is what's the structural soundness of the facade and what's the life expectancy of that, and that should be factored into our decision.
Was that something that was looked at the last time around? Because I remember when we first were talking about this, there was an emotional attachment to that brick building because so many people went to it. And I know I was talking to John Della Pascoli, historically, architecturally, it's not a beautiful thing, but I think people that went to it were attached to it. So I imagine that it was looked at thoroughly as far as the facade is concerned.
I don't know. That's a good question. Was it?
It's a good question for the architects, but they were, the whole building was looked at, what could be used and what couldn't be used from that perspective. And these are very reliable, good architects, and they said, yes, they can, and so much so they want to preserve the inside of the back of the building. That wall would become an interior wall, that brick wall, so that it would be an interesting feature as well as, continue to
Brick
provide
would
the
be
same.
exposed inside.
Yes,
Oh, I
so it'd be
see.
exposed, but I've got gorgeous drawings of it, I'll show people, but, so I don't, I think they explored the fact that could these be reused and could they not be? There's nothing in walls around this building that can be reused. This thing is just metal panels, nothing on the inside of it. But the foundation was studied to be that the foundation is solid enough, and even the parts we tear down, if we continued with that, the foundation would be reused to build basketball courts and play structures. So that part was, reusable.
But again, what's the life expectancy of it compared to the new construction? That was the question that they raised in the Collins report.
Question kind of builds
Yes,
off of that
yes.
too, is the long-term operating cost component compared to another alternative is that if you know, what's the lifespan of these improvements, what's the operating cost, what's the efficiency, what's the energy efficiency? And I guess these are
That's
questions
what the
for you at
Green
some point,
Grant
Dave.
did. The Green Grant designed B3 to be LEED silver.
And I'd say that from energy efficiency, but then you get into operation efficiencies, operating cost, and those type of things that, would Dave have more higher operating cost for this structure than the new structure?
Just the increase in square footage would require
It
higher
was-
operating costs.
Any building we build will be
New
more
materials.
square foot.
Right, I mean, no matter, you're gonna have, basically, if it's a new school or this being remodeled, rebuilt, I'm gonna have new mechanical, new electrical, all your infrastructure is gonna be new, no matter which way you go. You're not reusing any mechanical, any MP&E.
Mr. Chairman, the things, that's true, but there are things that can't be changed. For instance, your ceiling heights, because you're structurally there, okay, your window openings. I mean, you start getting to all that, there's nothing left, really, with the facade and so on, so. A lot of times today in design, there's a lot of, there's, people like a lot of light, they like a high ceiling, it's much more conducive. When you look at the office buildings today that are built, they want 9, 10-foot ceilings now. They used to be 8, 6, 8 foot, so they want more. A lot of times they want the industrial look, where the building is built and the ceilings aren't, there's no even suspended ceilings, they're painted, they're exposing the steel and leaving it, it's sort of kind of a, they call it industrial age. You see it in New York City now. I mean, so there's a lot of new things that you wouldn't be able to achieve using an existing structure. You're in a box
Right.
that you just can't get out.
No, I understand what you're saying, but in schools, I think no matter whether I know what you're saying, I see what you're saying. I've seen it in the fire stations we just toured last week. In a school, no matter whether it's a new building or a remodel, we're gonna have drops. And I understand what you're saying. We might be limited if we use that facade, but no matter what the ceiling height is, we're gonna have drop ceilings in a school, because you know what happens if we have open ceilings in an elementary school? That's where their attention is. So you'll have the lighting, the ceiling, their focus needs to be on what the teacher's instructing. And if you go with an open,
Ceiling
ceiling.
heights, whether they're dropped or not, make a difference.
Yeah, no, I understand that, yeah.
People's overall cerebral outlook, believe it or not.
That's important to consider too. And I just recall from the previous attempt that a lot of those things, the educational soundness, again, how the adult environment, but also the kids' environment. So I know a lot of that stuff goes into play with the schematic design, the feasibility study. So we're definitely looking at that stuff too.
Anybody else have anything to add or edit? Okay. So some of the things that were discussed with the middle high school site, the 2 potential locations that were noted, but they are about 10 acres each, using the 14-acre number that accommodates the elementary school. We would need to come up with some creative solutions to use something that's a little bit smaller than what is recommended. So that's going to be one of the things that we vet early on, I think, size-wise. I mean, as Michael said earlier, can it fit? I mean, can it legitimately fit on one of those two areas within the high school site. Positive, it's an appropriate use of a municipally owned site. Everything would be 100% new. It opens the option for the sale of this site. And then I just added, whoever looks at it inherits all of the issues that come along with it, of course. But I thought that was an interesting note in there. And then this is the question, I guess, on both columns. It would be TBD, the wastewater system reimbursement, depending on what actually comes down the pike. No construction phasing is a good thing. And again, with the busy street comment, not exactly relevant, but it's in there. The significant site constraints we already touched on: wetlands, potable water, wastewater setbacks, stormwater, and then the ball fields issue that we haven't really talked about, depending on which site we look at. I wish we had that figure of the two sites that's in the report, the stars on them.
I can email it to people, I have it on email.
Okay, well, just to have a visual, I'm sure everyone's probably fairly aware of. One of the areas is completely wooded, so that is the basis of this comment, the clearing and added site prep that would be required for the use of that area, and then the reimbursement rate of the site prep factors into that as well. And then on the star number one side, the renovations or replacement of the fields that would be taken up with the building would need to be redone somewhere else, whether it's on site, I don't know if that's possible, or somewhere else in town. Shared system wastewater upgrade, and then the reimbursement question is still there. Renovation points obviously are not allocated for a new building. And then added delays to the time, and that really is just talking about where we've come to date with the option of the school, and then kind of starting from square one with the new site, I guess.
I think going from this point forward, it actually is shorter potentially because it's a fixed timetable for building, for new construction. So I don't know if we could actually say that. We'd have to look at the numbers for
Okay.
30 months of renovation versus, whatever, 18 months or so for we'd have to weigh out the timetable, I think, so.
I think it
we'd
was
have to-
more just the starting with the modules, in all of the compliance with MSBA, but I mean, that's,
But in the end, it
Could
may
very
end up
well
to
be
be
true.
shorter, who
Right.
knows? So we should answer that question, I think.
I don't want to ever sound biased to either one, because I think as a committee, as we look at this, are we really taking all these factors? I think we're going to make the right choice based on what we really review and look at. But I think, I see up on the negatives that you have emergency, disasters, put all the children in one site, safety. But when we're looking at moving forward with a resource officer to the schools, I know that's also a positive for a resource officer, where if you've got all the schools on one location, we're making that person's job a little bit easier, a little bit more effective, because they are at that one location, spending more time there in a situation. So I don't know if that's necessarily just a negative. I think that could be considered a positive, depending on how you look at it.
that's a
But
good point.
we have a nuclear disaster. We don't have to take people out of this school, because this is on this side of 58.
They'll be safe.
I mean, that's a good point where you should really talk to the safety department, police, and find out. I actually did get an opinion from one where they thought the one site was a better solution than the two sites, so it'd be good to actually
Okay. I'll
get
just
that
put it on both
clarified
for
as
now.
just get it answered from
Yeah,
the
that's a
people
good
who would,
And just to reiterate, I think that's a huge question to be answered, because that really kind of motivated everyone to get the project going. We had that huge turnout after that horrible event in Connecticut, and again, I think that's going to be weighing on a lot of people's minds, everyone. Obviously, the odds are very rare, or very low that it's going to happen, but.
Well, but again, we're looking at adding that to the budget and funding that as a town, so we want to make sure that we're looking at all aspects and making sure that we're doing it in the best possible way.
Under the field renovations, I would also add to that is that those can all be CPA funded, and that can be used in some instances as a match fund.
Two more positives that were listed in the Collins report is that there is no phasing of construction. It's all done at once.
I think I had that
And
in there.
did you have that? And then no impact to the students during the construction phase.
Maybe I didn't.
You
Oh, yeah.
you have construction phasing.
And no impact to the students for the construction phase.
That'd be good to know.
Yeah.
And this may be covered by the, opens the option for a sale of the site.
Yeah.
I mean, let's just say someone took the site and all we're getting for it is that they were going to fix it. Could be adding signs of property back on the tax roll, bringing in money for operations.
Okay. Anyone have anything else to add? Any other comments?
You have significant costs associated with modular compliance / benchmarks. But there could also be significant savings too. And I'm not advocating that alternative, but you know, if this was a smaller facility, that was the purpose of having modulars, because you could be done quicker and less expensive. Again, they don't have a product that size we're looking at.
Right.
That's virtually the same, right, associated with modular compliance benchmarks, except on one side it's a savings, on the other side it's a cost.
Yeah, one side's the time, one side's the cost.
Is the location on the ball fields the same as the one on the other side of the high school?
Soccer field.
10 acres? Is that?
I
is that
think they're
what-
both about 10
The same?
acres, yeah,
The
from what I
ball field
read.
one isn't bigger or something,
The one, I didn't on the soccer field side, it's when you're at the middle school gym, it's the woods out there.
So it's across the street from the soccer field. Oh, like across that road in the woods?
No, it's on the same, it's on the school side of Pine Street, but it faces Pine Street. There it is. And it runs between the middle school gym parking lot, down that side of the street,
It's on page 37,
Yeah.
the Collins report,
with the red star.
with the red star.
Well, yeah,
It has
our
a different
color
color or not.
Over here.
Yeah. So it's
On the other side of the soccer field, yeah, that other side.
Yeah, so the one right there on Pond Street with the star is all wooden.
Yep.
And then the star on the ball field side, is that ball field area the same size? I mean, it couldn't be expanded out? I mean, could that be made bigger than 10 acres?
Well, the well zone's up there, the current
Oh,
well
okay.
zone.
Yeah,
See the
if that
circles?
circle on that
Yeah.
picture is the well zone, that's,
But the building's at the well zone too.
yeah, right.
So the 14 acres is not the size of the building. The 14 acres is everything included.
Like-
That includes your access, it includes your parking, it includes your bus stacking, it includes your stormwater, it includes the playground, plus the building.
And so those two star sites are roughly 10 acres.
So you could move some of the, you're already gonna have potentially shared parking if you use the one where the ball fields are, so that 10 acres may be 12 acres. I'm sorry, that 14 acres may be 12 acres just because of bus stacking and egress coming in there. If you're able to move your stormwater out into the woods there, that could reduce it further. But these are the questions that a engineering firm is gonna have to look at, that will put together a scope of work and have them determine.
Okay.
But I think the point that was made earlier on is, creative efficiencies. It's a perfect way to describe this. It's not that, right now, the information we have is not, no, it won't work. It's that it's constrained and it's gonna require or force creative efficiencies to figure out if either one of those sites could work. And then I think John brought up a good idea today about at least looking at this site. If we were able to solve the water problem, does that open up one side or the other of this facility to build a new building and keep it here?
Sir, I have one, it could be a positive and a negative, that,
A lot of those.
yeah. The share, if to create creative efficiencies, if we have to share a common bus drop-off, I would rather be more creative on the Pond Street side and figure out a way to do it, because I do think there's a significant problem putting little children in with teenage drivers that we would regret after a while.
Well, then, you're also.
So I would, I think the creativity could come from the Pond Street side.
I've heard that complaint all over town,
Yeah, that's a parents have brought
that
it up.
one problem.
Yeah.
Putting the little tykes on the same site,
Right.
bunched in with the high school kids and older.
Well, but I mean, that's like a change that's difficult for people to sort of grasp when you're talking about it. But if you look at a lot of districts that are out there, they're doing it now. And the East End and a lot of other towns have it
As
set
long
up
as they
that
have
way.
the traffic things.
Yeah, I think we need to be
Separate, right.
creative on the Pond Street side,
Right.
is my point.
Segregation is key to that. It can be designed, but it takes extra effort to make sure that that is designed into it.
And space,
In space.
which is gonna be a difficult part.
The last thing that was on here too, something that we will need to consider if we're thinking long-term, limiting the options for the middle high school. I mean, we talked about it already. If another school is built on this site and then down the road, when middle high school needs to be upgraded, we're kind of shoehorned in there, and those options are gonna be likely more limited.
So just for clarification on that, Liz, are you proposing that the high school, middle high is gonna have to be torn down and rebuilt new? Or can it be renovated on site?
It depends on what we do in the next 5 years. If we're able to spend a bid price of what they're calling $9 million, but of course, we're not gonna have to do that, we'll have to bid it out.
Sure.
We can make that building last a long time, but if we defer the maintenance and don't do these things, there's some internal problems with the middle high school. We've got, how many, Dave, 31
Interior classroom?
interior classrooms.
Like 20.
They have no windows. That'll be a difficult problem to solve in a reno. And we have all these singular rooftop units serving a few classrooms. The hallways are 4 feet too short, so that'll be another obstacle we have to overcome. But the main problem is that it was designed with all these interior rooms with no windows. And it also puts a stress on the heating and cooling that Dave can tell you about. So I don't know when we get to that point if we will have fixed what's currently wrong with it. If we haven't, they may have to really blow it apart. It would be kind of like this building. You could use certain parts of it, but with the fact that we know the hallways need to be wider, the spaces need to be realigned, we would probably lose our 2 gyms if we tore it down, because they only really let you build one. But we can't know the future. That's the main thing.
But I think what I heard you say is if the town puts in the required capital improvements into the building at estimated to be $9 million minus whatever reimbursement we get, that there's a strong likelihood that building could last significantly longer than what you're projecting it to be right now. And we would probably be able to get waivers for the hallway width, or we would not be able to get
No,
those.
because that's a new building code. They just have to be so many feet wide. Whenever we touch it, we'll have to bring it up to current codes.
Okay. Is that an ADA code, or is that just a code issue? Because I'm just
It's
trying
just
to...
what they used to allow for hallway passage for kids, and then that's without lockers. And right now, our lockers are only 10 inches wide. They can't even fit a backpack in them. So we can't replace the lockers because we can't afford the hall space.
Right.
So it just depends on how deep the renovation would go and how we would be able to do it. I would say it's entirely possible to renovate that school, but the only thing that'll be reimbursable in the accelerated repairs, roofs, windows, and boilers.
Right.
So anything else we do to it would not, new gym floor, all the things that need to be done with, that's 100% of the town.
Thank you.
So it just depends on what we're able to do in the next 5 to 6 years,
Okay.
so.
Steve Pratt, you have a thought?
Yeah, because this is part of what the Town Building Study Committee has been all about, and that is telling everybody in town what the potential costs are. We're talking about building an elementary school that may be 4 or 5 years away from being completed when you play it all out. Now we're hearing that within 10 years after that, we're gonna have to replace the high school. You're talking about having a debt service upon a debt service upon it. You have to tell the taxpayers that, because otherwise, you're just telling them, oh, here's the school. And then we're gonna wait and tell them, you know, later on, oh, by the way, this is why you have to tell them everything. That was part of, to what Dan said, was one of the biggest issues, was that, you know, here's this, oh, and oh, by the way, here's this, and oh, by the way, here's that. You can't do that. You
Well, that's
have
why
to-
it's been on our capital outlay plan for the past 10 years.
A brand-new school in 2031, I don't think so.
No, but the renovation piece.
No, I understand, but to your point, it's even more important to do those things now and say, you know, you got $9 million of expenses, because the septic system wasn't on the capital plan 3 years ago? Was it, 2 years ago?
No, it was on
Yeah.
there.
3 years ago. But
Oh, you mean wastewater, yes. it's been-
wastewater, it wasn't
it's
on
been-
there, so
it's
what I'm
been on
saying
there
is,
forever.
you have to tell everybody, this is the whole,
Well, I think that's why we
If I
did the
could,
Habib study.
To Liz's defense, I mean, I think that was what she was trying to get accomplished with the top part of this. I may not agree with the bottom numbers.
right.
But, you know, she's showing here that in 2031, without making these improvements, you are going to need to replace the middle high school because it'll be 45 years old at that time. Also, what Liz asked MSBA was that when can we apply for the accelerated capital project? And, you know, that is the next round of funding. So once this is done for next year, we can apply, you know, for the roof, the doors, the windows, and the boiler?
Roof,
Boiler.
No doors.
No doors, roof,
Roof, windows, and boilers.
roof, windows, and boilers, which is a big ticket on here, so.
No, I just wanted to compare the not doing something, meaning spending the $9 million over the next 5 years, versus, you know, and then as a result, you have to replace the school 10 years after building a new elementary school. That's the thing we gotta make sure doesn't happen.
Well, that's the purpose of the Habib study, was to tell us what we had to do absolutely to get, I don't think we're gonna get that particular kind of construction beyond 45 years.
And plus, the neighboring town built a school of a similar stature at the same time, and they're rebuilding it now,
I
so.
didn't think Plymouth South was a rebuild, I thought it was a renovation.
No, it's a total.
They're tearing it
Oh,
down.
rebuild, not
Total new building.
All right, so let's get this wrapped up, because it's getting late. I don't know if everyone feels the same way I do. It's a long day. So, Sarah, anything else? I don't want to chop you off, cut you
No, I mean,
off.
unless anyone else has any comments. I mean, this is just, the whole point of this was just kind of get the conversation started and kind of put all of the things that we've all been thinking about and talking about in one place and a, you know, way to kind of get this off the ground and start weighing pros and cons and comparing these two sites, I guess, as a starting point.
It's a great start. What's the next step?
Yeah, next
We,
step.
We'll probably have to go through each of the items and make sure we validate or put some kind of a number behind them and, or waiting.
We just need
And that's,
a date.
yeah, that's what we gotta do. Two things before we break up here. We gotta talk about, I mean, not too much talk, but what is the next date? I mean, I think you're getting a sense, if you feel how I do, that it's kind of urgent
You have to sign
to keep moving on this stuff.
enrollment.
I mean, at the very least, we're gonna be meeting every other week. Is there a feeling, and I don't know if there's a conflict next week, but James, do we have a school committee meeting next week?
Yes, we were gonna be doing the first and the third, I thought.
Yeah.
First and the third
I have
Mondays
May
with the-
19th done as our
with the
next meeting, is
discussion
that not
we had.
accurate?
It is, but
So that's,
John,
Barry's asking if we need to meet
talk to
ahead of that.
FinCom? Were they agreeable?
I have a meeting with them tomorrow night. I push this meeting tonight to tomorrow night, and I'll go over the schedule with them.
Okay.
all right, so if we were to meet on schedule, May 19th, is we still gonna be able to achieve stuff that we want to achieve? And Chuck, how does everyone feel
One
about that?
major thing is we're going to DEP, and it's gonna answer a hell of a lot of questions.
Right.
Do we have a date for that?
So-
I mean,
No.
He's gonna call tomorrow.
yeah, it's, I mean, I know I'm not gonna be
I thought you
meeting
told me
next
already.
week with DEP.
At least
The
back.
goal would be the following week. The likelihood is it could be 2 weeks later, because we wanna get water and wastewater and the director in there. So it's coordinating those schedules, so, you know, as much as I'd like to make the 19th work, I may need an extra week in there. So I would suggest that we meet the following week sometime.
That's Memorial Day on the Monday,
Uh,
so unless you pick a
I have a
different day.
suggestion, I mean, it
This
depends
one's
on how fast you need to push forward, but I mean, you could meet next meeting on the 19th and then meet the following week also. I mean, move it
Not
maybe
the-
a different
You
day
can't,
than
June
Memorial
2nd
Day.
is town meeting.
Not to, yeah, I was gonna say, don't we have to have something for June 2nd?
Yeah.
Wasn't there discussion of having
So
something?
we
for
probably
town
should,
meeting?
we should definitely, in my opinion, we should meet May 19th, and with whatever we have, not that you're gonna have the DEP stuff,
Yeah.
but I think we'll be able to accomplish a lot of stuff.
It
Yeah.
doesn't,
in the
it
2
doesn't necessarily have to be a Monday, though. I know that can be our original meeting dates, but considering we're doing this as because we know we have that pressure town meeting, maybe we can be a little more compromising on a different day that gives him the chance to make that meeting with
How,
DEP.
how is the 27th for people?
Good.
May 27th?
It's the Tuesday after Memorial Day.
I'm gonna be talking to the selectmen, and this is still tentative right now, but I've talked to the finance committee chair, I've talked to at least one member selectman. We may push town meeting out another 2 weeks until that would be the 16th.
Yeah.
Again, I'm just speaking out loud right now, we haven't confirmed that, but there's some that want to have a little more time to review it, I think that's a good idea. We've checked the schedule and it is available, the auditorium's available the 16th, so our immediate time crunch may be a little bit off, I mean, a little bit lessened.
Yeah,
Not
that's
so
good.
much, over 2 weeks, but.
Yeah,
So should we just meet the 19th as planned and go
Yeah,
from there?
yeah, I think so.
I agree with you guys. And even if it's not a 3-hour meeting, you know,
No.
at least we keep the ball rolling with this, because
No.
sometimes you delay stuff.
I
and it
just
never
want to
happens.
add something, so we're, talking about meeting on May 19th, we talked a lot about site selection today, it sounds like we have to answer a lot of questions before we can really make any decisions. But we kind of also need to talk about the designer OPM, are we putting it out to bid, are we reusing the same?
I think we have to figure out where we're gonna go build first, because if we go ahead with B3, we are able to use the same designer OPM. But if we go to build on a new site, we have to go for procurement.
Well, let's speak to that. Even if we stay on the same site, I think we should still go out to bid, and hopefully the current applicant, or the current designer, should be more qualified to bid and give us a better price. But utilizing public resources, again, as I said earlier, I think everything should go out to bid. Yeah, no matter what.
And it's perfectly fine, I'm just telling you what they allowed us to do at MSBA. They said you can just start up with them, or you can go for procurement. But if we go to a brand-new site and a brand-new building, we have to do it. I'm just telling you what they told us.
So you think that site selection is first and foremost
Yeah.
before we, okay.
But, well, actually, we can still go out to advertise for an OPM now with or without a site selected. The OPM is supposed to help us through this process. So we don't have to come out and say it's option A or option B.
OPM is something this building committee can decide. MSBA doesn't take part of it. So OPM is something we can put out a request for proposals and interview them and select ourselves. Designer selection, there's 16 votes and we get 3, and that's at MSBA, and they have a whole bunch of people who helps us choose. They're very good and they're very nice, and it always works out. But OPM, we can decide at any point.
Okay.
I mean, I would even suggest we put that on the agenda for our next meeting, to keep things moving along, is to review a draft RFP for an OPM, and maybe even be able to finalize that and get that out on the streets. If not that meeting, the next meeting, but just to keep things moving along.
And who creates the RFP for the OPM?
Well, MSBA has a couple of draft documents, Liz has stuff that we've used before.
It's the scope of work for the OPM hasn't changed much, so we can take what we have and tune it up.
Update it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have, I even have all the former bids. We have everything that we did before if we need it. There's information.
Okay.
All right, so we like the 2-week thing, 2 weeks from today, just to keep this rolling, because you're making good progress here, good discussion.
I may
Right.
have to tell it to you, but we'll figure that out.
Okay, just give us that 48 hours
I
notice.
will do that.
And now, who's leaving with something to do? I know a couple of people have volunteered to do some. Mike's
I
got
am.
something?
I'm gonna take in the DEP stuff.
Okay.
I need somebody
Yep.
to do the RFP for the OPM.
Okay, who can do the RFP for the OPM?
Will Liz do that?
Oh, excuse me.
Liz has updated.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Ross. Can you do the RFP for the OPM?
I will do it.
All right, cool.
I'll pass it by everybody, but I will do it.
All right, and then Heather, you're going with communications?
Yeah, I have a couple things, so a couple of people to connect with.
Okay, super. And anybody else have any assignments that I missed?
Get on the DEP train.
You're gonna jump on that train, okay. All right, so, hey, I wanna just say this before you, I might say this a lot throughout this process, but I'm serious. Thank you all for being here today and going forward, because you are making it happen, and you are volunteering your time, and it's really impressive how you're doing this. So that's my uneloquent way of saying it, saying thank you very much. All right,
So I got a quick question.
and we gotta make, oh, before we adjourn,
Did you want me to reach out to the, John Rogers, from, Rockland, to see if he'd want to come at a future date and explain the benefits?
I second John's motion.
yeah, that's great. So we got a motion, we got a second. Any discussion? I see none. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? None. All right, that's approved. Thank you, John. All right, so this sounds good. Now I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Great. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, have a great night.